The dumbest school rule ever. Teachers really expected us to follow this? In grade 8, we were banned from standing in circles at recess because of potential scandalous activity going on in the middle. We stood in squares instead. Be there and be square. For a while in my school, groups of kids would stand in circles shouting, "Fight, fight, fight," until a teacher came to break up the non-existent fight. God, we were jerks. We couldn't wear winter clothing like jackets, hats, or gloves in class because apparently they were gang symbols. This was a small farm town in Wisconsin. Besides obviously having no gangs, it was frickin' cold, even indoors in the winter. But clearly, wearing warm clothing is something that only gangs do. Also from a small town in Wisconsin. We weren't able to wear jackets or anything like that in class either for literally the same reason. One kid came into the class wearing snow boots and the teacher told him to put them back in his locker. So he came back with his farm boots that smelled like straight-up manure. We all knew where he was for the rest of the day. I'm a cheerleader, and for School Spirit Week, I wore the uniform they gave me. I got dress-coded. That is the ultimate high school moment. They banned wristwatches, and no one really knows what the reason was. Well, it's a gateway clock, you see. Before you know it, people will start bringing pocket watches, then wall clocks, then grandfather clocks, and before you know it, some kid walks in with Big Ben. Then what do? Can't wear too many matching shirts because you could be in a gang. This was in regards to a kid with cancer wanting to make a bunch of t-shirts. My school was in buttfrick nowhere, Nebraska. American schools seem to be obsessed with the idea of gangs. Oh, they really are. My public school in the 90s tried to make us wear private school-style uniforms. Avoiding gang colors was the big argument for this. This was an affluent school in the suburbs. Schools will latch on to any perceived potential transgression to enforce authoritarian rules, which is how you end up with teen girls carrying ibuprofen for period cramps being treated like smack traffickers. Our school banned hugging because of its eroticism. As you can imagine, the boys at school started giving each other very sensual high fives for the rest of the year. There is no group that takes homoeroticism more seriously than late middle to high school boys, apart from maybe the military. Haha, love these kids. My friends and I would have done exactly the same thing. I can picture the slow high fives, clasping fingers, and incredibly suggestive moans. Perfection. No backpacks to class, but purses were allowed. Girls started carrying purses big enough to be considered a backpack. Guys got teed off and started carrying purses as well. Ha! I'll just bring my books in a microwave. Huh. Or you could go the tall girl way and carry around a milk crate. Middle school had banned salt and pepper from being used in the cafeteria, claimed it was too unhealthy. Still sold Mountain Dew in the vending machines, though. School I used to teach at had similar rules. Some bullcrap about federal nutrition standards or something. We'd just keep them in the teacher's lounge along with hot sauces and chamoy and a few other condiments and leave them on our desks. In my freshman year of high school, we had a terrible vandalism problem. The bathrooms would be broken in various ways almost constantly. In a stroke of pure genius, the staff decided that any bathroom that was vandalized would be closed off for the week on first offense, closed for the quarter for the second one, and permanently on the third offense. They took back the rule after closing every bathroom on day one. The prom was a mandatory lockdown for the night in order to avoid students going to parties after prom. Prom was held at various houses across the town instead. I hate it when schools shoved their noses into everyone else's business. Oh, we had overnight dry grad. It wasn't a dance, but more like a game night. There were bouncy houses, obstacle courses, and other games and stuff, plus food, obviously. It was fun, but by about 4 to 5 a.m. I was pretty tired and asked if I could go home. No go. They wouldn't let anyone out of class unless their parents came and got them, or it was an emergency. It was stupid as heck since we were 17 or 18 and had driven ourselves to the school, and all it did was make us drive home overtired at 7 a.m. I'm surprised everyone made it home all right since we were basically sleeping against walls and each other by the end of it. Shoes are to be worn as the manufacturer intended. I have no clue who was wearing their shoes incorrectly or how, but this line verbatim was repeated to us over the morning announcements when there were perceived infractions at various points throughout the year. They decided everything bad happened in the last 5 minutes of lunch, so lunch got 5 minutes shorter each year. Any group that had more than 5 had to be up to no good, so no groups bigger than 5. This wasn't some big city public school for troubled kids, it was a tiny Catholic school in a tiny farming town. The worst offense by a student of the whole time I was there was some kid walking across the street to get a soda from a store. If you were involved in a fight, you got suspended. While it sounds reasonable, context didn't matter. I got suspended once for not throwing a single punch, kick, or whatever. I got suspended because somebody knocked the books out of my hand, and when I reached down to grab them, they punched me in the face. I got suspended for walking down the hallway and unprovoked getting punched in the face. Screw Brandon Valley Middle School. My buddy got suspended for something similar. His Marine Corps military police mother told him in no uncertain terms that if anyone tried that crap again, earn that suspension. Frickin' surprise, surprise, the guy tried it again and he went ham on the kid. Busted nose, torn ear, black and blue for weeks. The fallout was exactly the same as not fighting back at all, except my buddy got a pat on the back from his mum and a new video game. Tell you what, nobody tried that with him again. If it wasn't zero tolerance, then it wouldn't be a problem. If someone gives you some physical trouble and they get punished, easy peasy. They've got cameras everywhere. Surely it would be pretty easy to see. You couldn't wear any kind of head items that were gang colors, as in red or blue. This included hairbands, scrunchies, beads in your hair, ribbons, anything. I got in trouble for wearing a blue hairband with white polka dots. Don't joke about the polka dot cartel. My high school mascot was Daniel Boone holding a musket. A kid wore a Guns N' Roses shirt to school and was told he had to change shirts because of the pistols on the shirt. He pointed out the hypocrisy of the school mascot, and they changed everything. The mascot was switched to holding a flagpole instead. Every instance of the mascot was changed from the multiple signs outside and around the school to the giant picture in the middle of our basketball stadium. Holden, you're a frickin' legend for this. I mean, hey, at least this shows a consistent internal logic and a lack of hypocrisy on the part of the school admin, although definitely a lack of self-awareness too. Suspension as a punishment for skipping school. Don't want to come to school? Well, now you can't, until next week. And no tank tops in a desert climate, because shoulders are too suggestive for school. They banned hats because hats can be used to signify gang colors. The only major crime group in our area was the Hells Angels, and they certainly weren't having people wear hats for children to signify their allegiance. It was so bad a few years after I graduated, I came back to volunteer as a chaperone for a school trip as a favor for my favorite teacher. The principal saw me wearing a beanie from across the school, and he literally sprinted a half-mile to chase me down and tell me to take off the hat. When I told him I wasn't a student and didn't have to follow the dress code, he said either take off the hat, leave, or he'd call the cops. It wasn't the actual day of the trip, I just had to show up to get the itinerary and stuff, so I just said, F you, I'm out, idiots. Yeah, that's a great way to get rid of the free help that you need in order to have the trip in the first place. Our adult chaperones were allowed to ignore rules that applied to us kids all the time. And sure, we complained about it, and the teachers just told us to shut up. That's how it worked, and how it probably should work. We had percentage grades, and if you earned 100% in a class for the semester, you'd be dinged down to 99% because, and I quote, only God is perfect. As far as I know, this wasn't an official rule, and I only know of it happening one time to the girl who eventually became our valedictorian. But that was the reasoning she was given. It was a Catholic girls' high school, and there were a lot of other weird, strictly enforced rules, especially around the uniform, but the only God is perfect rule will always take the cake for me. Did they just cut the percentage of a single person? Oh my god. You got in trouble if you just wore a Hanes white t-shirt after school because you were in your underwear. You might as well just wear your literal underwear to make a statement at that point. My high school banned t-shirts that had the cover of Rush's album Signals, an album popular at the time, which features an image of a dog sniffing a fire hydrant. They considered it scatological because the dog was about to pee on it. This struck the entire student body as extremely stupid, and roughly half of the student body picked a day to wear the t-shirt. We won. Oh my god, imagine how terrible it would be if kids found out that dogs pee. We weren't allowed to have cough drops in our elementary because the school considered them substances. I mean, God help you if you have a headache. Oh, you need aspirin? Well, you need to eat more fiber because that's tough crap. No fist bumps. Their reason for this was that kids might accidentally punch the other person in the face. The school I went to was in a pretty rough area, so there were lots of incidents where kids ended up getting into actual fights. Took all of the doors off the men's bathroom stalls because of vandalism for 2 whole months. Same at my school, but for all of 4 years. We had no toilet paper or mirrors either. We were all given these ugly planners at the beginning of the school year, with a few pages at the back filled with hall passes. If you didn't have your planner, or if all of your boxes were filled, you weren't allowed to go to the bathroom. And no, you couldn't buy a new planner or borrow one from your friend. The only reason you had was if you had a doctor's note, but no doctor was going to give a note for an upset stomach caused by the school lunch. Oh wow, I totally forgot about this until you said this. We had those too. Some teachers gave extra credit to kids who'd never used any of their hall passes. I went to a school that had block scheduling, so our classes were 2 hours long. Pretty messed up that we were incentivized to never use the bathroom now that I think back on it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe to Am I the Genius? No jackets. They think we might hide things like phones or bombs in there. We had to wear belts. Somebody snitched that people weren't wearing belts under their sweaters, and they actually checked and a bunch of people got detentions. Stupid. We had belt raids at my high school where the dean would burst into classes, completely interrupting any education, to check that everyone was wearing a belt. Attended an all-girls high school. You had to bring a male date to dances or not attend at all. No going solo or with your girl mates. It was so backwards. All of the girls, in my 6th or 7th grade, started putting pink laces in their shoes. I don't know why, but the school officials banned colored laces, saying, "Pink is a gang color." Girls must wear skirts even in the cold black rain. No fitted clothes for girls. This was high school. If the swell of your chest or butt were visible due to tight fabric, you had to go home. This wasn't a religious school. This was just a school run by dumb pieces of crap. My freshman dorm at a religious college had a list of rules that filled a legal-sized sheet of paper. It included being in your room for forced study time every night, keeping your towels straight on the towel rack, and making your bed by 9 a.m. every day, including weekends. So, if you wanted to sleep in on Saturday morning, you were supposed to get up, make your bed, and then go back to sleep on top of the bed. Involved in a fight? Same punishment regardless of fault, and this led to more dangerous fights due to everyone just going for it. Saw people use chairs, cricket bats, and anything that was just at hand. Getting expelled from that school was really hard as it was the last chance school in the area, and after that it was the special reform school. My high school had half of the bathrooms closed off at all times because they feared the students would smoke. A girl and a boy couldn't sit together. The school employed disciplinarians to roam around the school and monitor this activity. If found, you'd get a reprimand. If found repeating the offense, you got sent to the principal's office, and if continuing, then eventually it escalated to the parents. My parents would have just laughed if my school told them I sat next to a girl. We can't use black pens. Why? No more than 5 friends could hang out together during lunch. Our high school principal was trying to crack down on gangs, but I never saw a single teacher enforce the rule. No backpacks in the halls. Oh yeah, because carrying all of our books between classes was a great frickin' idea. Plus, hardly any time between classes to exchange books meant carrying multiple classes' things at once. Okay, update. Looks like this is the norm for quite a few people in school districts. Doesn't make the rule any less stupid. But to be fair, it depends on your school. My middle school was 8 or so classes a day with 3 minutes between classes in a large school where classes could be a far distance away from your locker. My high school was 4 classes and a much smaller building, but my friend's high school was similar to my middle school situation. I don't know, we had the option of having backpacks, and a few psychopaths like me just carried all of their books for every class around all day, but when given the option, most people just used their lockers, so I don't imagine it would be devastating if that rule were implemented in some schools, to be honest. Your situation in middle school does sound a bit crazy though. No playing on the mini-golf course. Due to the school having mineral rights on oil land in the mid-70s, our school system had huge amounts of money. One thing they did was get 9 concrete animals on the playground for miniature golf. These looked like a lot of fun to play on for kids, and they were concrete, so they were indestructible. They took up a third of the absolute center of the playground. We couldn't touch them, play on them, or get anywhere near them. In PE, we broke out the putters 1 time in all of grade school. A few years later, they had the high school seniors take them out with sledgehammers. My school banned backpacks at one point. To protest, boys just didn't bring anything with them to class, and girls brought really big purses. The $200 blazer was compulsory, and we got detention every single day until we got it. No rubbing linseed oil into the school cormorant. No beards. If we spoke our native language instead of English, we had to pay a fine of about 30 to 40 cents. Zero tolerance for bullying. The faculty were the worst ones. Too many double standards. They had no problem enforcing it when a student was doing the bullying, but did absolutely nothing to punish the teachers when they did it. Ugh, yeah. Having to stand and take punches, only to have the principal inform you that your assailant was part of the basketball team, so… Particularly inconvenient since our school had a tradition of contract hits, and the captain of the basketball team decided he didn't like me, so I ended up with a few junior varsity players who didn't ride my bus making cameos. The one time he actually did something himself, he snatched the bill out of my hand while I was zoned out in the lunch line. I could have popped him one and went on with my day, but nope, I had to follow him until he got bored of the attention. Great policy, that zero tolerance. They banned dodgeball. Oh yeah, me too. They banned soccer once. No hats, period, unless you were devoutly Jewish or Muslim or some other religion that required it. No torn pants, skirts, or other articles of clothing, which wasn't enforced at all, they still have that rule today. And no long jackets for boys. It was just fine for girls. School added thumbprint scanners at gates of school which counted as registration. Needless to say, I'd just walk to my school, scan my thumb, and walk back home with them none the wiser. It was a great few months until they finally noticed. Wait, months? We weren't allowed to wear plain red, blue, yellow, or white tees because of the white tee song and the idea that there might be t-shirt gangs. A second one was named after my crew. A second rule was put in place because of my crew. We weren't allowed to have any comic or anime artwork during school hours, and students couldn't exchange money with each other unless the teacher approved. Girls can't show your shoulders or above the fingertips with your hands straight against your legs. Boys could wear tank tops with holes in them and basketball shorts, and girls were sent home if their damned t-shirt had a neck hole too big. Well, shoulders are the most enticing part of the female body. School I went to once had a policy against drinks that weren't water. Granted, I love me some water, but it sucks not to be able to have a nice Gatorade or something in school once in a while. Well, until I just bought a metal water bottle and circumvented that rule pretty quickly. One-way hallways. Like, just let me get to class, who gives a crap? A kind of candy because people would pretend to smoke it. I don't know if it's dumb or funny, though. We weren't allowed to play tag or football at lunch, only frisbee. When I asked the principal about what the difference was, he responded with a sarcastic tone, "A football is round and a frisbee is a flat disc." He left the school later that year, went into another school, and a few years later was brought up on charges for failing to report the mistreatment of a student by a teacher. Great guy. In elementary school, only grade 5 or 6 to grade 8 ate in the lunchroom. We'd have a lunch monitor stand at one end of the cafeteria watching all of us eat, and none of us were allowed to get up. The only reason we could stand up was to go to the washroom, and we'd have to raise our hand to be allowed to stand. When the lunch recess bell was about to ring, we'd have to be dismissed, table by table, to throw out our garbage before we headed out. Conservative Christian college. A group of us played Age of Empires one weekend. They didn't like it and called a meeting. Everyone involved got misdemeanors on their records. There was nothing in the handbook about it being against the rules. The only person that didn't get any punishment was the son of the president, even though he was just as involved as the rest of us. It was quite interesting explaining the write-up on my record when I transferred. Oh, you got a misdemeanor for what? They made it a rule after the fact and did this several other times with things such as nail polish or radio control helicopters. No fun allowed. I'm surprised you didn't show yourself converting other countries' infidel soldiers with the priests in that game. You know, the whole "Yololo, I owe you, yololo." Hey presto, look, they're Christians or Catholics or Lutherans or whatever belief the school was. Always had to have your shirt tucked in. Not a uniform, but literally just any casual clothes that were worn to school had to be tucked in. Basketball shorts and tank top, tucked in or you get sent home. Jeans and long sleeve, tucked. So goofy and authoritarian, but this was in a rural school in the south, so I'm not surprised. I was a rebellious 16-year-old at the time, and it teed me off like nothing ever has. Everybody had to eat lunch silently. No talking on Fridays. So developmentally inappropriate and leading to more talking during class time. Our primary school had this for a while, every frickin' day for like a week or two, and then they stopped it because no one was following the rule. This was circa 1994 through 97. No hugging, like at all. First offense was a write-up, second was a detention, third was in-school suspension. Locked bathroom doors in the period after lunch. You should have gone at lunch, is what they'd say. Also banned duct tape accessories when that was a trend. They said that it was a gang activity. What? Couldn't play tag outside. No wearing hats inside. No trading stuff from your lunch. This was all at my elementary. Early 80s. May. Girls in miniskirts. Guys in running shorts. The miniskirt issue had been settled by the courts years earlier, and miniskirts were protected by law. Principal goes to a conference, and the VP bans running shorts as a distraction. So the football team shows up in miniskirts. Legends. I almost ended up hitting on the middle linebacker. He was in full drag and looked pretty good from behind. When could you not stop laughing at the world's most inappropriate moment? My grandparents, both sets of them, insisted on burying my parents as Catholic for their funeral. Little did they know my parents hadn't been practicing the religion since they moved out of their parents' home. They hired a lady who was singing off-tune Catholic songs so loud into the microphone that it felt like a drunk karaoke concert. Everyone probably thought I was shaking from crying in the front row by myself, but I was literally laughing so hard that I had tears streaming down my face. I had to practically choke myself to keep the giggles from coming out. I could just imagine my parents sitting next to me going, "What the frick is this?" and laughing with me. It was a very inappropriate time to laugh, but that dang lady got the best of me. Back in 2004, I was at my cousin's funeral, and my aunt was in such a shocked state that she couldn't stop laughing. She was known to do this at funerals. Because laughing is contagious, I also started laughing a bit, and I had to go to the back of the church and to the bathroom to get it out of me. There's a scene in the movie The Pianist, which is about a pretty dark period and place in history. The scene is where a woman is shot in the street and her body folds in on itself as she falls to the ground. We watched that movie in sophomore year English class after reading the book Night by Elia Wiesel. It was completely silent in the classroom during virtually the entire film. But at that part in particular, some kid just kind of piped up from the back of the class in the silence with this sad, disappointed tone in his voice like he just found out the lunch lady was out of chicken nuggets. Oh, she folded. So many of us busted out laughing and it was completely inappropriate and I couldn't help it at all. The teacher was not pleased. I heard a kid break wind in church during a wedding. I had to remove myself because I couldn't get it under control. It was one of those loud, echo of the old wooden pews toots. The acoustics in that place were excellent. I was at church for my grandfather's 5th-year death anniversary, and the guy was singing so badly my grandma and I were almost dying from laughter. Held up a cadaver's arm, forgot the arm was detached to the body, raised it up, wondered why it was loose, panicked that I detached it, dropped it on the floor and thought the professor was going to be mad, hid the arm under a gurney while the professor was staring at me half a meter behind. I turned around, looked at her, and laughed. Worst moment ever. My dude, you just gave us a lot of questions there when you wrote out your story about holding up dead body parts without any sort of context. Was this some sort of mortician school or something? Imagine just saying this verbatim in a conversation with a similar lack of context. In fact, please do that, please. My father and mother went to a funeral of one of my mother's aunts that she wasn't close to. In fact, my father had never met her. As they stood at the open casket, my father said to my mother, "She just doesn't look like herself." Again, my father had never seen the aunt before. For whatever reason, this struck my mother as very funny and she started laughing. She held her hands to her face and ran from the casket. Her sisters saw this and thought she was distraught and followed her out to console her. That was where my mother had to explain that she was laughing and not crying and why it happened. She was so annoyed at my father, it was hilarious. I had this really nice but really awkward physics teacher in high school. He was a large man, but spoke with a lisp and a very soft voice. Imagine the guy from Office Space asking for his stapler, that's how he sounded. One day he was giving his lesson and mid-sentence he goes from his voice to what sounded like Satan himself. "Okay, class, please take out your books." Excuse me, must have something in my throat. Then he continued like nothing had happened. I could not, for the life of me, stop frickin' laughing, and I was the only frickin' one. It was the most bizarre and frickin' hilarious thing I've ever seen. I had to walk out of the class to catch my composure. This was at least 15 years ago now, and I'll never forget it. At a funeral, the pastor kept referring to God as the Great Comforter, and all I could think of was a tacky bedspread glowing with holy light. Every time he said it, my giggles got worse to the point where I had to pretend I was crying really hard and left to hide in the bathroom. Visiting my grandmother's grave with my grandfather for the first time a few years ago, I expected tears and a solemn day. Instead, we passed a grave marked Wanda, and my grandfather said, "Well, I wonder what killed her." None of us could stop laughing. My grandmother would have loved it, to be fair. My friends from college and I are still super close even 15 years later. There's an inside joke involving giving people a specific fake name that we always laugh about when we get together. Last week, one of those friends tried not to be alive anymore. We'll call him John. John's brother, another of the close friends, called me and told me that John had tried to self-delete and that he was at the hospital. Then he tells me that when asked for identification at the scene of the attempt, John gave the paramedics the fake name from college. As sad as I was about what had happened, I burst out laughing so hard when he told me that. I couldn't help it. I'm laughing now even thinking about it. All of the other members of the group had the same reaction when John's brother called them. All of them. We've got a lake of fireside property in hell. Thank you. Last year's Thanksgiving, right before the meal, we all stood in a big circle and said a prayer and what we were thankful for. Well, my mum's uncle, I'll refer to him as Uncle, his name is Richard, so we called him Uncle Rick. You're going to have to imagine the R replaced with a D so we don't risk demonetization on the channel. When we all stood up, it was revealed that Uncle Rick had forgotten to zip up his jeans after going to the bathroom. My dad and I were directly across from Uncle Rick, and we were barely keeping from bursting out laughing. Then he leaned over to me and whispered, "I'm thankful Uncle Rick remembered to put on fresh underwear this morning." About halfway through the meal, we were still laughing about it when Grandma came over to yell at us for being distracting. She basically asked what we were laughing at in a not-so-nice voice. We pointed her gaze across the room and she couldn't help but laugh a bit. We told her it had been like that for the whole meal. The way we'd set the tables up was in a big square of folding banquet tables, so we could look out straight ahead of us at Rick's boxes. At my father's funeral, my daughter was 3 months old and had a lot of belly pain. She tooted so loudly that even the priest needed to stop talking for us to stop laughing. He even told us that the church was a serious place and if we couldn't behave, to get out. I told him the deceased was my father and I couldn't control my daughter's toots. Used to be a member of the student council back in college, and this one time during a meeting with the campus dean, who was explaining very seriously how some students were crapping on the toilet walls and throwing literal feces on the ceiling, which was building up expenses for cleaning. I was asked to give ideas on how to tackle the issue, and I clearly remember trying not to laugh and holding it in perfectly, but then, as I made eye contact with a friend of mine in the council, we both burst out laughing to the point where our stomachs started to hurt, which led to other members of the council laughing out loud. It was the first time meeting the campus dean as well. After that, anytime I'd see him, he'd give me a dirty look. In school, we did a course on mythology and had a project where we had to write our own mythological stories for the creation of creatures or places, stuff like that. One kid wrote a story about how a man was being mean to his horse, so the gods cursed him. One day, his horse threw him onto a spear which went through the back of his head and down his forehead, and he was transformed into the first unicorn. I couldn't stop laughing for a solid 5 minutes. My teacher berated me for laughing at the violence, but the kid and I both thought that was funny as heck. At the wake for the grandma of my honorary sister and brother, at some point the old biddies from her church decided the children needed to come up and say goodbye to her in front of all these mourners, none of whom I knew. Also, this was Eastern Kentucky, where everyone knows everyone else, so already people are eyeing me up trying to figure out who the frick I am and why I'm sitting with the family. Well, before I realize what's happened, the two of them have marched me up there with them and pinned me in between them. I'm awkward in the best of situations and was supremely uncomfortable at funerals, so this was already my personal hell. We stood there and stared down at her in front of hundreds of people as this somber music plays and the priest instructs everyone to pray for us as we say our last goodbyes. She's wearing this double-breasted sailor suit kind of thing, and my sister and I are making quiet comments like, "Well, she looks nice," when all of a sudden our little brother blurts out, "Anchors aweigh, old girl," in a perfect British mariner's voice and frickin' salutes. So my sister lets out a long, drawn-out gasp of, "What the frick?" And we just start trembling with laughter. We can hear all of the old church ladies awing Because it looks like from the back we're overcome with grief. As soon as we're able to control ourselves, we essentially frog march our little brother down the aisle with our heads down, and we head straight out the door to the car. Honestly, that kid is freaking hysterical. Also, I should have worked out going into this that there were going to be a lot of funerals in this video. Probably the most likely event for deeply inappropriate hilarity that there is, and thank God for the content. Cheers for writing in. I don't know if there's a name for it, but when I get really nervous or scared, I start to laugh. Like, if it's bad enough, you'd think that I was watching the best scene in the best Three Stooges skit ever made. So, I was driving down the interstate when I saw a deer bolt across. It got hit by a car in the oncoming lane, flew like a rag doll in front of my 18-wheeler, and exploded. I don't know what happened, there was just blood everywhere. It looked like I'd gone on a rampage in GTA, but with the blood physics from Mortal Kombat. I pulled over to inspect the damage. Just blood and bits of flesh everywhere, and a cracked and bent grill. I got lucky, so I filled out a report with my company and took off for a shop to see about fixing the grill and hopefully for a truck wash. And wouldn't you know it, there was an open weigh station just ahead. The Department of Transportation officer comes out to see me as soon as I'm in sight and waved me over to the inspection area. He immediately starts laying into me about why the heck the front of my truck is covered in blood. And I am just laughing. I mean, I couldn't get a single word out. Every time I tried to say something, I got a few words in and then just couldn't start again because of the hysterics. Finally, his partner started inspecting the truck and found a piece of hoof. I finally managed to calm down enough to talk and we got it all sorted. Luckily, the DOT officer was having a good day because he decided not to write me a ticket and let me use their water hose that they had on site to wash most of the worst off before I took it to a shop to repair the grill. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a second-year law student, I had a classmate abruptly get up mid-lecture and waddle quickly out of the lecture hall. There were about 90 students in the lecture, and in law school, the academic approach is the Socratic method, which is usually the professor and one student going one-for-one during the course of a lecture or class. The guy comes back into the classroom, and the professor abruptly halts his current line of questioning with another student. In front of the class, the professor asks the returning student, "Is everything okay?" The student responds, "Bad Chipotle," and walks back to his seat. I spent the rest of the lecture period giggling through the professor grilling students about family law. In short, a classmate in law school has an explosive bout with Chipotle that makes him duck run to the bathroom in the middle of a lecture. In high school, there was 3 religion courses you could pick: Catholic, Evangelical, I'm told that's Protestant in British, or Neutral. You'd have different topics in class and different destinations on the yearly trip. I picked Catholic, and on the yearly trip we went to a monastery. On the 3rd day, one of the exercises was to talk about death. So there were 20 kids in a circle of chairs and everyone was crying because everyone lost a loved one at some point and death is a hard topic. The teacher starts talking about how she imagines death to be like and begins to tell, "I imagine after dying there has to be a long, long spiral staircase and you go down and down until there's a door, and behind that door," the rest I didn't hear because my friend next to me whispers, "a mother frickin' kebab stand." We both sat there giggling for like 20 more minutes until the meeting was over. To this day, I feel really bad. I was sat at dinner with friends this one week and one of the kiddos was saying that they had extra stomachs for some particular food. Started talking about how cows had extra stomachs. Then somehow it got to comparing humans and cows and one of them said in the brightest, most angelic little voice, "But Mom doesn't have udders." I'd made the mistake at glancing at her husband and I swear the filthy twinkle in his eye was audible. Thank F that I have long hair. I dropped my head down to look at my plate, so my hair covered my expression and I sat there with my shoulders shaking violently. He asked in a rather amused voice if it was okay as I appeared to be vibrating. I couldn't frickin' breathe. My granddad had "If You Don't Know Me By Now" played as the curtains closed at his funeral. I shouldn't have laughed, I couldn't help it. What a legend. See, my dad had Queen's "Another One Bites the Dust" on the way in and Meatloaf's "Bad Out of Hell" on the way out. He was a character. Some older kid at my school ended up in a coma after taking N2O. I think he ended up dying, so it's a pretty dark story. One of the principals came into an assembly and angrily declared, "Nitrous oxide is no laughing matter." I think most of us were too young to know that nitrous oxide is laughing gas, but for some reason I knew everyone was so silent and scared of the angry teacher, and I was just sitting there trying not to laugh audibly. My senior year of high school, I went to this memorial breakfast with my principal and a few other seniors because my principal was begging a few of us to go and, hey, free breakfast. So getting to the end, this woman starts singing an incredibly moving song, and she's doing it beautifully. But I look over at my principal and he just looks so dead. Like his face was completely blank, and because I also don't deal well with emotion apparently, I thought it was the funniest thing ever. So while this lady was singing and some people are crying, I'm losing my mind and trying so hard to stop laughing, and I just can't. My friends thought that I was having a complete mental breakdown, like I'd finally lost my mind or something. I felt absolutely horrible about it and ducked out as soon as I could. When I worked with a financial advisor, he misspoke and asked me to check a client's investment in black word for rooster beginning with C instead of BlackRock, an industry fund. He didn't realize what it said, and he was super big on maintaining a professional, humorless working environment, so I couldn't even point it out. I managed to keep a straight face long enough to excuse myself, and then spent 15 minutes wheezing in the spare office. When I was 17, I worked at an Ace Hardware. I found a guy looking at construction adhesives and sealants with the most confused look on his face, so I asked him what was up. To clarify something, the thing he was asking for is spelled C-A-U-L-K. I'm looking for caulk. It needs to be black. And I need it to stay hard. I'm really trying to hold it together right now. 1 minute, sir, while I find the guy that works in that department. I ran off to find the guy that knew caulking and bring him back, introducing him to the customer as our resident caulk expert, and the customer nods at him approvingly. I then escape to the break room where I'm dying laughing trying to blubber explain something about hard black caulk to my other coworker. You people are so immature you'll laugh at anything. I'm hungry. Maybe I should take a break. Not sure what I'll eat though. Maybe some peanuts. Nothing I like more in my mouth than some peanuts. Then I can go practice my piano, and before you know it, this channel will have its very own pianist in its hands. Nothing you can't do with a mouthful of peanuts and a spare pianist in your back pocket. On the best date of my life, I went to see a really stupid movie called A Walk to Remember with my first girlfriend. We were sitting in the 4th to 5th row from the screen, and 2 rows ahead of us were a group of younger girls. One of them was rushing back to her seat with her friends, and she slips and falls. It was a nasty fall too, and even though I felt bad for her, I couldn't stop laughing. It was awful. I don't know why I couldn't stop, and I was even like, God, I know I shouldn't laugh, but it's just making me laugh harder. It took me at least 10 minutes to stop. Girl who fell, I know you're out there somewhere. I hope my laughing didn't make you feel bad. To this day, I still don't really understand why it was so funny to me. I was in a local support group for friends and relatives of people with bipolar disorder. One person was relating the story of her older teenage daughter who, in a manic episode, grabbed a flashlight and took it upon herself to stand in a downtown intersection and direct traffic until she was picked up by the cops and taken to the hospital. I kinda covered my mouth and pretended I was having a coughing fit and excused myself to go to the restroom. High school English class, which was first period. A few days before, I got in trouble for sleeping and coming in late. My teacher called me a hibernating bear, which I found funny. A few days later, we were doing oral book reports, and this one kid with a stutter was doing his. The class was being patient with him, but he was struggling a lot. Then he gets to a point in his book where he talks about a bear. That reminded me of how just a few days before I was called a bear, and how funny I thought that was, so I busted up laughing. I wasn't laughing at him for stuttering, I was laughing at being reminded of being called a bear myself. However, I realized that's exactly what it looked like. The entire class gasped at me in horror. I didn't even try to defend myself, but I do promise it wasn't directed at him, it was at being called a bear myself. My mum's funeral service. It was just at the funeral home, but we had a priest since my parents are Catholic. My dad is severely disabled, so he was only brought in for the actual service part of the whole shebang. We had calling hours first and then a 15-minute service, as it would have been too much for my dad to have longer. So my dad was sobbing, which was really hard, and the priest was very kind and comforting him before the service. I stood next to my dad's stretcher and held his hand. Then the service started. Anyone remember those old FedEx or Micro Machines commercials? I think he retired and became a priest. In the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, we bless this woman. It looked like I was crying for my departed mother, but I was biting my cheeks so hard to keep from laughing that the tears started. I had to walk outside right afterwards so I could let it all out because I couldn't hold it in anymore. Before my dad's brain injury, he would have been right outside laughing with me. In my school, my geography teacher was notorious for scolding students in the most creative language, and while one of my friends was getting scolded, I think the teacher said something about Shrek's donkey having more brains or something, I couldn't control my laughter and drank water to choke and cough so that I didn't get scolded for laughing. When my grandfather was dying, he'd do a lot of dark humor that he and I found hilarious, just silly stuff. Well, the inevitable happened and he passed away and was cremated. His ashes were put in a box, and that box was put in a Marks & Spencer's bag. So my aunt turns up to the plot, and people are crying, and I swear I hear my grandpa say, "They'd better not have left me on the kitchen table." And I lost it. I couldn't stop laughing. I could see in my mind's eye someone opening the bag and Grandpa just being in there. I just couldn't stop laughing. My mum kind of got it when I explained, as she knew that was something he'd say. A guy on the train in visible pain after an exclamation of, "Oh God," from inhaling my poison butt gas, and I can't control myself as he's gagging. Even off the train, I continue to lose my composure and choke out unexpected laughter. Even years later, I still do. Oh God, my professor was very solemnly telling us during an emotional discussion about when he watched the North Tower fall on September 11th. I was so horrified that I started laughing. I physically couldn't stop, and my eyes were begging for help. I laugh uncontrollably when I'm uncomfortable, and this was one of my worst moments. When a police officer asked 15-year-old me if I'd ordered substances from somewhere, and I had to grin the whole time despite being innocent. When we moved, we suddenly got a package with some pills and some powder in the mail to my name. I brought it to the police and it tested positive for whatever it was. So I had to go and get substance tested, and before that I got asked by this really scary-looking bald guy with scars on his head if they were in fact mine. And I just started to grin and laugh while denying it. I obviously tested negative and I was allowed to go back home. Well, it turns out that someone at our old home that knew we moved out ordered them to our old empty mailbox, but we'd made a thing that everyone addressed there and got relocated to the new address, so it landed with us. What are the grossest conditions a health inspector found at a restaurant? Former health inspector here and current third-party food safety auditor. A few things come to mind. First was a grocery store so infested with rodents that an entire group of them was living in the dairy cooler. You know, there had to be a lot of them in the store if some of them were resorting to living in a cold room. There was also a Chinese restaurant getting ready to open for lunch. I walked in and temperature-checked the items in the walk-in cooler. All of them were well above acceptable temperatures. The cooler had broken down in the night and it was no longer functioning. They wanted to serve the food anyway. I had to embargo the entire cooler worth of food and stand there as they filled trash bag after trash bag with meat and took it to the dumpster. As I was leaving the location, I drove around to the back and they had employees pulling it all out of the trash and dragging it straight back into the building. I had to stop them, make them return it to the dumpster and pour straight bleach all over the food to ensure it couldn't be used. There was also a restaurant so infested with cockroaches that when the manager greeted me at the host stand to take me to the kitchen, he had a roach crawl across his back right in front of me. And finally, I observed people smoking in the kitchens and in the meat departments of grocery stores. Also observed people using chewing tobacco and keeping their spit cups on the food preparation surfaces. Most of the stuff we think is disgusting isn't necessarily what the general public would even notice. A lot revolves around hand washing. If you really watch someone during food prep and see all of the things they touch and then attempt to handle ready-to-eat foods, it's disgusting. People just don't even think about hand washing like they should. My friend in school talked about how trash the place he worked at was. He said stuff like if someone dropped a slice of pizza, they'd pick it up and just serve it to the next guy. They'd do this with all their food. The restaurant part is fancy, but the kitchen was a mess and nobody really cleaned it. How are they still in business? Well, when the first health inspector comes, they'll fail and they have a certain amount of time to correct it. Then the supervisor of the inspectors comes in, who's a good friend with the restaurant owner, and he passes the restaurant either way. Oh, this isn't even my worst, but I never ate there after this. My first weekend in Canada, I went into Popeyes because who doesn't like mashed potatoes? They were cleaning when I walked in, and there was a guy with a pressurized hose blasting the floor, and the water was spraying everywhere. That fine mist of grey floor water could be seen coating the food waiting in the pass, the prep tables, everywhere in that tiny space was just getting blasted with floor goop. Some restaurant near me got shut down because they had freshly severed goat heads in the refrigerator. They didn't serve goat. Huh, hail Satan, I guess. Well, that cult had to go and find another venue afterwards. I hope you're happy. I worked at a McDonald's that was just about to get rebuilt and had just narrowly passed inspection. What does this mean? The owner doesn't want to replace anything because the store is about to get torn down, so the whole place just went to crap. A drunk person flushed a pair of underwear in the bathroom and clogged the sewage once, causing all manner of awful things to come up through the drains in the kitchen and the stockrooms. We still served food, Then the stockroom where we kept a lot of food items had a ceiling cave-in and fiberglass insulation was dangling less than a foot away from food products on shelves. We were regularly pulling trash cans from the lobby and kitchen anytime it rained to help contain the water from the leaks in the ceiling back in the stockroom. I left last November. The store doesn't get torn down for another month, so I can only imagine how crappy it is now. I didn't know Silent Hill had a McDonald's. I was a tradesman working on a hotel in a fine city in Alberta. The reason I was working on it was because a new owner was renovating and updating the hotel. Their restaurant had a salad bar. Every single member of the kitchen staff got fired when the new owner discovered that the salad bar hadn't been cleaned or sterilized in months. They just kept adding more food on top of the old stuff. Not an inspector, but a cook. One very popular local restaurant has the worst roach infestation ever. If you picked up the ticket printer and tapped it on the table, you'd have 40 to 60 baby roaches just scatter. Roaches everywhere. They'd fall from the ceiling or crawl onto the plates of food before the server could take it out. It was the most disgusting place. I quit and it's still super popular and still buggy. That reminds me of mine. I used to inspect fire alarms for grocery stores and we had to open the hoods above the grills to check the fire suppression system. As soon as I pulled the panel off, dead crickets started pouring down. Thousands of them. I wasn't really sure what to do at that point because I'm an alarm technician, not a health inspector, so I verified that the alarm switch worked and put everything aside from the mountain of crickets, now on the kitchen floor, back where I found it, and told the manager they should hire an exterminator. The same store also had a black widow infestation in one of their utility sheds. One of the news channels where I live does a weekly segment called Restaurant Report Card. It shows the good and bad DHEC reports of the week. There was one Chinese restaurant that had live chickens in the kitchen. There was an article a few years ago about a Chinese restaurant in New York City who was doing some kind of cooking in a back alley and the neighbors noticed. Hey, Prosperity Dumpling! Damn, that place was tasty though. Tiny hole in the wall. You could get 5 dumplings for $1. The place that replaced it, East Dumpling, reduced the offer to 3 for $1. Guess that's the price of fancy pants so-called rat-free dining. Not a health inspector, but when I worked at Subway, we caught a coworker doing something inappropriate. My manager had to look at a camera for some unrelated reason. He was skipping forward and accidentally went too far forward. He noticed that worker putting a bin of tuna on the floor, and he keeps looking at the tape. The worker pulls his pants down and proceeds to enter the bin of tuna. He makes sweet, sweet love to those fish, finishes up, goes into the bathroom to clean off, proceeds to smooth out the bin of tuna, wraps it up, and puts it back in the fridge. My manager immediately has me throw out the tuna and make more. Needless to say, that guy was fired. And while this was 20 years ago, I still can't eat tuna that I didn't make or see being made. My mum used to be a health inspector. A bar had a bear chained outside and the owners would bring it inside to hang out with the patrons sometimes. Walked into a Mexican restaurant one time and saw some lady soaking some tripe in a mop sink. I saw that and told them to throw it all in the dumpster and bleach it in front of me. My boss had seen a restaurant defrosting raw shrimp in a mop sink with the mop draped over the faucet. My other coworker had to work a foul odor complaint where this Chinese buffet was closed for about a week without utilities. He walked in and found the food was still in the buffet line. He said the stench was so rotten that he immediately threw up upon opening the door. That food was stewing in its own juices for a week in the Texas summer heat. Those are the worst ones that I can think of. Not a health inspector, but I do deliver beer, so I see the backs of many restaurants on a day-to-day basis as we're dropping off product in their storage areas. The worst was a buffet that had an inescapable smell of hot, rotten milk. Not sure how I even know what that smells like, but it was like they'd been microwaving rotten milk for about an hour and left it somewhere. I had to leave the delivery. My coworker was sick with a stuffy nose and did it for me as I gagged outside. Talked to a couple of coworkers later that week and they agreed that place always has a very weird aroma. I worked at an ice cream shop when I was 15. My boss found a mini fridge in an abandoned closed-down elderly home. There was still food in there, with cottage cheese that expired 3 years prior to me opening it. She gave me 2 bottles of bleach and said, "Go to town." Now, I pleaded with her not to keep the fridge, not because I had to do the Charlie work on it, but because it was fricking nasty, even if we did get rid of that mold that was literally eating the plastic interior of the fridge. I didn't feel right putting the food in there and selling that food to the customers. I cleaned it anyway and put it out on the floor, but refused to put stuff in there. When people put stuff in it, I'd throw it away or move it, depending on what it was. I also had to negotiate with my boss on how often she'd let me clean the fry later grease. I wanted to do it once a day, but ended up only getting a once-a-week approval, which was better than once a season like she had been doing it. To make everyone feel better, I used to work at Costco and that place was really clean. The ice cream machine was dismantled and cleaned at least every week. It took 2 hours each time. The fryer was emptied and cleaned every day. In the food court, we'd spend hours on cleaning alone. The meat department was hosed down with disinfectant and scrubbed every day. Someone was hired just to clean the bakery department during the evening. The health inspector was seen shopping there a couple of times, which I think is good news, right? I may not have a great experience working there, but I know it's clean. Your story of healthiness and hygiene has no place in this video. Go back into the sanitary abyss from whence you came. I cast you out! I worked for a company that had a lunchroom with an older woman who cooked our breakfast and lunch. I think she was a friend of the owner's. She'd bring in a daily special, like chili, but also made sandwiches and whatnot. We had out-of-town customers, and when lunchtime came around, the secretaries would set up lunch in a conference room by the lunchroom, and the lady would make something special just for them. So I was taking away plates after those people had eaten and bringing them to the lunchroom for lunch lady to load the dishwasher. Now, not everyone had finished their meals. It was chicken and rice this day. It was rather late, and I had an employee come in asking her to make him something. I was going back and forth doing my thing, and I see her scrape the leftover food back into the pot, from several plates. I ask the guy, who was reading something, so not looking at her, if he wants chicken and rice. He says, sure, and she makes him a plate of leftover food that she had scraped off the plates I gave her. I know I should have said something, but I just noped out of there real quick. It bothered the heck out of me, so I confessed to a coworker, and she's all, you have to tell the boss. I did, it escalated to the owners, and the lunch lady was fired. My mother briefly became the head of the health inspection for our county. I recall 2 good stories. First, she noted that even though there were many violations, there seemed to be no punishment from the departments for restaurants that forced them to fix these things, except for new restaurants. She asked why, and their response was that, these restaurant owners are our friends. If we punish them or fine them or send out a violation notice, they might not like us anymore. She tried to fix that, but as you'll see later, she ended up quitting prematurely. There was this guy, an old dude who was, quote, close to retirement. He was a crap stain on society. He was verbally toxic and creepy to the lower-level inspectors, not to my mother, who is, matronly. What she did do was fire his butt. But the county board rehired him since he was apparently close to retirement. After he attacked some of the women in the office, she fired him again. This was like month 2 of the job. And then 5 people on the county board and her all had flat tires the same day, and they discovered that each of them had a box of nails emptied at the bottom of their driveway. So the county board rehired the guy again, naturally. She quit. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Health Inspector here. I just shut down a place due to a severe cockroach infestation. I also shut down a restaurant a while back as there was a severe rodent problem. I'm talking droppings everywhere, in the utensil bins, on the food prep surfaces, just everywhere. Owners were brushing it aside as they worked. Live mice stuck to glue traps under the sinks. Ugh. And there was one other place with a rodent infestation. The owner just left cardboard boxes of open poison throughout the restaurant. Although we can order a place closed, it doesn't happen that often. We try to educate first and work with the operators. Having said that, sometimes a ticket or a closure order is the only thing that will work. Most places I inspect are pretty decent. A lot of what we see is a lack of safe food handling procedures and hand washing. You know, like preparing raw chickens with gloves on and then placing the gloved hands right into the flour, tossing the chicken, touching sink taps, cooler doors and stuff with no hand washing. Also, cultural backgrounds and the way the food was prepared back home might not meet the standards in Canada. We also inspect personal services, nail salons, tattoo shops and stuff, drinking water system, and private septic systems and pools. I'm not a health inspector, but I worked at a restaurant that was barely skirting by on the inspections. We had a big roach problem, but we did a good job of keeping them out of the actual food, which I guess is the big thing they look out for with health inspections. The most egregious issue, though, was the time I was making milkshakes and accidentally cut my arm on the metal counter. Well, I didn't notice how bad the cut was until I saw blood in the ice cream tub. Being a responsible person, I go to throw the ice cream out when the manager interrupts me, saying I should use the first aid kit and they'll take care of the ice cream. Well, I came back to the same tub of ice cream returned to the freezer, but the blood scraped out of it. They'd kept using the ice cream. I want to clarify that they scraped the blood out before continuing to use it, so they didn't technically serve my blood directly to people, but there were probably still trace amounts. I was in the training program to be a state health inspector after I graduated college. The majority of inspections weren't memorable, and small stuff got written up, like temps being too low or high, not having gloves accessible, storing meat boxes on the ground, stuff like that. The two inspections that I remember being horrible were both at low-end Chinese restaurants in strip malls. In one inspection, the wok chef had an overflowing ashtray right next to the meat bins. Rodent droppings, piles of dead flies behind the range, open doors to the outside, it was just nasty. We also had to check the soda machines and their hoses. The soda line at one place was so caked with mold and funk that it was a miracle the soda could even get through. We couldn't figure out how any previous inspector had missed that or what the frick had happened. The soda tap was the worst because it ruined eating out and having a mixed drink. I'll never be able to drink anything out of a soda line ever again. I got a better job offer 2 months after that and ran out of that job. Yeah, being a health inspector is one of those jobs that seems to affect people's perceptions of the things they eat in a probably beneficial but unpleasant way. Ignorance is bliss, I'll say. I'd rather not know how many parasites I'm constantly shoving into the decaying and decrepit ancient temple that is my body. Former employee of a few food and drink related places, let me tell you about rat droppings in the pizza boxes, the fry cook dropping things and then just picking them back up to fry. He reasoned that the oil was hot enough to burn off anything. That oil was only changed weekly, if not bi-weekly sometimes. The ice cream shop where no hairnets or gloves were offered or needed, so managers' hair ended up in the ice cream. Also, questionably clean hands making cones. Slime and mold colonies, not growth, we're talking freaking civilizations, in the ice makers and soda spouts at a whole chain of gas stations. As far as I know, I was the only one who ever cleaned those at my location alone, and whenever I babysat another store. Also, the coffee urns. Black bottoms and grinds caked on the inside. If you live near them, go to Racetrack or Sheets. Those places have the cleanest urns and spouts I've ever seen. I worked at a buffet about 8 years ago and my kitchen manager used to drop food back into the fryer after dropping it as well. I was disgusted by this on my first day. The next day I found out that our soup was only made once a week. I called the health inspector and took a few pictures before abruptly telling the few customers what they were eating and subsequently quitting my job. Okay, so my dad was a health and hygiene officer in the Air Force back in the early 50s and was stationed in England. His job included inspecting kitchen and latrine facilities at bases, overseeing quarantine on troops returning home from Europe, and doing health inspections on said troops. He and some fellow H&H officers were on leave in London and decided to have lunch at a pub that was advertising a soup and sandwich deal. They sat down to piping hot bowls of tomato soup and were talking and eating when one of the guys says, good soup, nice and meaty." Everyone stops talking as it sinks in that tomato soup should not have meat in it, and my dad reluctantly digs his spoon to the bottom of his bowl and comes up with several well-cooked cockroaches. Being trained in such things, they stormed into the kitchen and confirmed that the place had their soup heating on a back burner, uncovered, directly below a cold water pipe. The rising steam condensed to the pipe, making it slippery and causing whatever scurried across it to fall into the soup. They yelled at the owner and reported the place, but beyond that, they couldn't do much about the unexpected protein. So yeah, these stories are pretty gross, but you can put your mind at ease by going to your county health department's website, and they should have a list of recent inspection reports for your favorite restaurants. Happy eating! Oh, so many stories. Mexican restaurants, Chinese, and Italian restaurants are typically the most egregious offenders, which sucks because their food is usually the most delicious, as long as you're okay with potentially dying later from it. I've only ever closed down one restaurant. It's actually much harder in most places than you'd imagine. Lots of red tape that prevents field staff and even managers from using their professional judgment in the service of public health. A pizza place was operating without a permit at one point in time. I'd drafted a letter stating that, and before I went out to hand deliver it, I got a complaint notification. Someone had eaten their pizza the day before, and their son had felt glass, or something that felt like pulverized glass, in his pizza. Backing up for a moment to the red tape thing, we're not legally allowed to investigate or inspect restaurants who don't have a permit. You can thank the US Constitution for that. You can see the dilemma. We decided the best course of action is to deliver the letter saying they're operating illegally, and that it would be in the best interest of their business and the public health to allow us to investigate the nature of the complaint. After I got permission to go in and take a look around, I was appalled. The manager has fingernails that extend probably half an inch beyond the nail bed, and they are caked in flour and other ingredients. The other employee has dirty bandages all over his fingers. Both of these characters are dressed in filthy uniforms. The walk-in cooler has loads of uncovered foods sitting beneath stalactites of mold, all beneath a ceiling of black filamentous fungi. The pizza prep table has broken doors and hinges and is covered with what I can only describe as putrefied ingredients from 2003. It clearly hasn't been cleaned since then. The plastic Lexan containers holding the food items in the cooler are all breaking apart and chipping. At this point, I've got a few ideas as to what that guy found in his pizza, and I don't think any of them are glass. It's probably a fingernail or a band-aid or plastic, or maybe broken metal from the cooler itself. Then I see it. The most disgusting can opener I've ever seen. To put it in perspective, mounted can openers are like the low-hanging fruit of every health inspector. They're almost always out of compliance, and writing one up will make you look like a try-hard jerk who's out to get the restaurant owner in trouble. They're usually not a big deal. Except this one. This one is absolutely caked in dried, vile pizza sauce goop that has turned black with age. The blade itself is so dull and chipped it's literally peeling metal filament off into a mass next to the blade. Every time this thing is used to open a new pizza sauce, which, by the way, is put into a cracked plastic container and covered with a trash bag to keep the loads of flies away, it deposits metal chips, flakes, filaments, whatever you want to call it, into that sauce and into the bellies of the customers. Needless to say, I was appalled. I had the person in charge call the store owner, who pleaded with me to let him stay open. Given that they didn't even have a permit to be open in the first place, this was a no-go. I went back the next day with backup, and we formally closed them for operation until they could get everything back into working order. Surprise, surprise, they called the next day saying everything's fixed, and I can't believe it, but it was. Managerial lack of control aside, they must have spent $1,000 and 16 hours cleaning that place. The one dude even clipped his fingernails. Success story? Maybe. Gross example of what you get with second-rate, poorly managed restaurants? Definitely. They're lucky no one has yet died from eating there. I worked at McDonald's. The McCafe machines were the most disgusting things I've ever seen in my life. So much mold and slime and disgust. The first time I cleaned the machine, I never ordered a McCafe drink again. Just another day at McDonald's. Former inspector here, and oh my goodness, I could write a book. First, Burger King had raw sewage coming out of the drain ankle-high in the bathroom. Employees acted like it was normal. There was a Taco Bell that had a fly problem. A customer brought back a taco with a live fly inside. There was mold in some ice machines that I saw some with gobs and gobs of pink mold oozing in the ice off from the ice blades. A Popeye's chicken serving rotten grey chicken that stank like death. Chick-fil-A, another raw sewage backup, but in the kitchen this time with the owner wiping sweat off his face and continuing to make sandwiches. Another Popeye's chicken where the whole building was slanted and about to fall over and still operating. The other Popeye's chicken who knew who I was and who spit in my food. Wherever you go in this job, there's lots of broken coolers and food well away from the recommended temperatures. A Taco Bell with no AC in the summer, no coolers worked and the employees were sweating into the food. Upper management kept delaying the AC repairs, and it was fixed 3 days after our inspection. I also watched a GM pull a spatula out of dirty sink water to flip the burger patties. Scratched her butt while handling a burger. And although this doesn't make me sound the best, I'm always extra wary of foreigners buying restaurants because they tended to be the worst offenders. What happened when someone jumped into a taxi and initiated a real-life car chase? I used to drive a taxi for my uncle's company. A guy got in my taxi, says, "Just follow that car," and reassured me it was nothing serious. Except when the other car stops, he gets out and runs to the car we were following and drags the guy out and starts just punching him in the face. I got out and was yelling at him and calling him a butthole for lying to me, and he got all in my face and threatened to beat the crap out of me too, said a bunch of racist things to me and then ran off. The guy who got punched had his nose broken. The weirdest part was that he had no idea who that guy was. I'm actually a taxi driver in a bike or taxi pedicab. I was hanging out in a corner when a coworker of mine got a ride across the intersection. Suddenly, a guy walks up to me and tells me to follow that cab but keep a distance. The guy looked current or ex-military. His demeanor, haircut, and attitude, he had one of those earbuds like the agents from The Matrix, exuded the vibe of being a very professional and competent person and not giving an F at the same time. So I was born for this moment. I'd read all the Tom Clancy books as a kid, all the books about spycraft during World War II and the Cold War, every spy movie ever made. I kept about 100 yards distance, and then I'd accelerate when they went around a curve anytime they were near a light or intersection. I had all the lights memorized. I did this just to ensure that we'd make the same light, but a little later than they did. At one point, a car pulls up alongside and another guy switches place with the original guy, and we keep going. After about 12 blocks, the pedicab pulls over ahead of us, and the guy tells me to pull over. Hands me $20 for the $12 ride, although I would have done it for free just to live my 9-year-old fantasy. I mean, it was probably just local cops, but I can dream. I was in New Orleans, and the cab I was in got sideswiped by a drunk driver. The drunk driver then took off. I told the cab to follow him, which he did. We ended up in a parking lot, and we watched them go into an apartment building. The cabbie had the station call the cops. I wrote a statement for the cabbie, and he called me a new cab while he waited for them. I did that once as a passenger. We said it as a joke. We were in a group of 6 and couldn't fit in a single cab. So I went to a second cab and said, "Follow that cab." We expected the driver to laugh it off and ask for our destination. Instead, he just took off and followed the first one. I mean, I hope you said, "You never saw us, okay?" and tipped him $100. I love the idea of doing this and just leaving the poor guy in his car wondering if he'd just aided and abetted a hit on someone. Also, gotta love how gung-ho some of these drivers are. They're completely ready to leap into action. I once had somebody jump into my car, and I wasn't even a taxi. I was driving down the street in Boston and was stopped at a red light, minding my own business. Suddenly, my passenger door flung open and someone climbed in. Completely shocked, I didn't even have time to react. For some reason, it never entered my mind that I should be alarmed or concerned about this trespasser, so when I saw that it was an elderly lady, I just remained calm. Without skipping a beat, she said in a thick Russian accent, "Yo, take me home, please." So I started driving. I asked where she lived, but she said, "Just keep going. I told you when to stop." At that point, it dawned on me that she probably had dementia, and that she likely thought I was someone she knew, or maybe even a taxi. Nope. After a few minutes of conversation, it was abundantly clear that this woman had simply picked the first car she'd seen, got in, and requested a ride. During the 10-minute car ride, she asked about my life. I was in college studying psychology at the time, and when I told her this, she said, "You'll make good psychologist. Very nice boy." It put a big smile on my face. My grandparents had all died either before I was born or during early childhood, so I don't think I'd ever had an elderly person say something like that to me. It felt nice. Finally, we reached an apartment building and she told me to pull over. When I put the car in park, she turned to me and said, "Thank you driving me today." I assured her it was no problem at all and wished her the best, and her parting words to me as she climbed out were, "Very good boy. Good luck with studies." After pausing a moment, I drove away and just kind of let it be. It was such a nonchalant and comfortable interaction that I resisted my temptation to immediately text friends to tell them what had happened. It felt like that would have cheapened it or turned it into a novelty. It was just so natural, and I went with it. She's unlikely to be alive at this point, but I hope she enjoyed the rest of her days. Godspeed, Russian grandma I had for a day. You know, sometimes people do leap into my cab and shout, "Follow that car," but it's usually followed by, "I've always wanted to say that." A friend of mine is a taxi driver, and this has happened to him. An elderly man rushed inside his taxi and pointed out loud to follow a red Toyota. This man never explains why to follow, just tries to frantically call someone. My friend asked multiple times if they needed to call the police, but the man just waved no and pointed to follow the car. They circle around town, finally ending up in front of a house where the car they were following parks. As the car stops, the man says, "Hold on a moment, I'll pay," and jumps out of the car. An elderly lady steps out of the red Toyota, and the man, apparently her husband, starts to scream, "Why did you leave me at the mall?" The woman is waving her hands and screaming back, "What are you screaming about? You're here!" and walks inside the house like nothing has happened. The man returns and pays for the drive, being sorry about it all at the same time. My friend thought they were following a burglar or something, but it turned out the lady just forgot her husband at the mall. Funny situation in a way, but sad in a way too, as my friend said. It was either dementia or a really screwed up marriage. Oh, I'm not a taxi driver, but I was the passenger for a story that is similarly cliché. Back when I was an actor and an active substance addict and alcoholic, what's the difference between those three, I know, I had a director threaten to recast me a week before the show if I was late to rehearsal one more time. To put that into perspective, recasting a major role after rehearsals have started is generally unheard of and almost unthinkable so late in the rehearsal process. She was really fed up with me. On this particular day, I was running late as usual and had 5 minutes to get to rehearsal. It was a 10-minute walk or a 5-minute drive. I flagged a cab, hopped in, and said, "I need you to take me to this address, and if you can, I need you to step on it." The driver smiled wide and said, "I've always wanted to hear that." Cue him putting the pedal to the metal. Within 10 seconds, we were approaching 65 miles per hour on a 30-mile-per-hour city street, weaving through traffic, clipping yellow lights too close for comfort, and generally whipping this cab around in an extraordinarily haphazard and irresponsible fashion. I was stunned, wide-eyed, in absolute shock and terror, unable to process that he quite literally heeded my request, or that this was actually happening. I thought I was going to die. It was the best cab ride of my life. I was 2 minutes early to rehearsal. I left my flute on the bus. I wasn't about to get my butt whooped for forgetting my $1,000 silver hollow stick on my way to orchestra practice. I followed the car. It stopped at a suburban house. The guy went into the house. They were his family and didn't have room for him with them. Not as wild as I wanted it to be honest. I drove a taxi one summer in a party resort. One night, 2 guys jumped in and yelled, "Follow that car," which was another taxi that I knew the driver of, and I obliged. Turns out one of their friends was drunk as frick and decided to just go to their hotel without telling them. They only saw the guy leaving the club drunk, and they thought he was going to a skinflick club without them. He was actually going to the hotel, as he was quite hammered. Another time, 3 girls jumped in the car and said, "Follow that car!" The car in question was a black sedan with tinted black windows. Yet it wasn't that shady in my humble opinion. We followed the car for 15 minutes, leaving the resort going into a forest. The girls start freaking out as one of their friends, also a girl, was seen stepping into that same car. Yeah, it turns out that she had just hooked up with some guy in the club they were in earlier, and she was about to do the deed with them when we pulled up next to them. It was the weirdest summer. Well, what can you say? Those girls' hearts were in the right place, and you can see why maybe they'd be concerned. It's damned embarrassing for everyone involved, but at least you got an entertaining story and hopefully the price of the cab fare. Not a taxi driver, although I was driving down a main road and saw a guy running around with a baseball bat and then some cop cars parked on a side street. Young me decided that I wanted to get involved, so I pulled down the side street and found a cop on foot a good distance away from his car. I told him about baseball bat guy and he gets on his radio. I guess he got an immediate update on his radio, looked at how far he was from his car and says, "Can you drive me down the road?" I'm thinking, frick yeah, and I tell him to jump in. He does, and I'm seriously driving around back roads with a cop riding shotty, giving me directions while on his radio. It only lasted for about 2 minutes, and then he jumped out to pursue the guy on foot. Not a very satisfying ending to the story since I never found out what happened. But damn, that's my story. I asked a taxi driver that question many years back. He said that it had happened on 2 separate occasions, and both times a wife was trying to catch her cheating husband committing adultery. One of the wives actually caught her husband meeting his mistress. My dad used to drive taxis for a short while, and he once gave a man a free ride because the first thing he said upon getting in the taxi was, "Follow that car." My dad had always wanted someone to say that to him and was overjoyed. I'm not a taxi driver, but a police officer. I was moonlighting at a club, and a fight broke out inside. The bouncers had an unusually hard time getting this one guy out of the club. I went inside to help, and he took a swing at me and then took off running out of the club down the street. I gave chase, but this guy was fast. I didn't have a chance at catching him. I chased him maybe 2 blocks and saw a taxi sitting in front of this other club. I jumped in the taxi and told the driver to follow him. We caught up with the guy as we approached him, and he was attempting to flag us down. I told the taxi driver to stop for him, and as he opened the door, there I was. He was too surprised to do anything but stand there. I placed him under arrest and called for another unit to come and pick us up. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Oh, you know, often I'd get people hopping in and saying, "Just follow that cab," without giving any real destination. They just had too many people in their group for one taxi. It's not exciting. But one night, I picked up 4 guys having a bachelor party, and one had left their phone in a taxi earlier in the day and had been tracking it using another's phone. 45 minutes of speeding all over the city, cutting taxis off that might be the one with the phone, while 4 grown men hopped out of my car in the middle of traffic and swarmed the unsuspecting drivers to inquire about the missing phone. It must have scared the heck out of a bunch of people. We finally found it. The meter said $60 and they gave me $120. Not the most exciting story, but definitely the most fun fare that I've ever had. I've been driving a cab for about a year now, usually work the 6 p.m. to 3 a.m. shift. My dispatcher radios me to her house with 5 minutes to go to the end of my shift. Short 2-minute drive later, we live in a small city, I pull up in the circle driveway as a car pulls out the other end and speeds off. the largest man I've ever seen in my life comes barreling out the house like a freaking bull, jumps in my cab, and says, "Did you see that car? Follow it." I caught up to the car and followed it out to the highway. As soon as it got on the highway, the car put on its hazard lights and floors it. The mountain man in the back seat says, "My wife is in labor and my father-in-law is driving." He tells me to catch up and that he'll give me $200. So naturally, I floor it going at about 90 miles per hour in a 45 zone. His father-in-law happened to be city police chief and had called in an escort. I looked in my rearview mirror and I saw 4 cop cars about a mile off and catching up quick. I panicked. I almost started to slow down when he told me they were an escort. Sure enough, 2 of the cops go speeding past me like I was in park. Keep in mind I'm still going 90 miles per hour. The other 2 pull behind me as we still had another 2 or 3 miles to go. Another minute or so passes and we come squealing up to the ER. 2 nurses were already waiting outside. He thanks me, hands me the money and jumps out the car. In short, got a police escort with a pregnant woman's husband and made $200. Not sure if this one qualifies, but almost. A colleague of mine, a UK police officer, was on foot patrol and saw a robbery in the distance where a driver was pulled from their car and the robbers drove off in their car. My mate stopped a civilian car and gave the famous line, "Follow that car." The driver apparently went wild trying to keep up with the robbers. The whole time with a uniformed police officer in his passenger seat giving a commentary to his base. They lost the stolen car and my colleague asked his driver to stop. He got out and let the driver go without asking for his details. As the driver went into the distance, my mate realized he had taken out his peg, his truncheon, in the car and left it on the dashboard. Luckily, the driver rang in later and it was returned. No idea what happened to the robbers, the stolen car, or the victim. Sorry. Not a taxi driver, but when I was 18, driving home late at night in Seattle, I was rear-ended by a guy, and when I tried to call the cops from a payphone, it was 1992, he pulled a get on me and told me to get in his trunk. So I knocked him down and ran, and luckily there was a cab sitting there at a red light, so I got to jump into it and yell, "Drive, just drive!" He didn't hesitate, he just took off. The guy stayed with me at the 7-Eleven until the cops came. I won't forget that, I was pretty shaken up. If you're out there reading this now, thank you, taxi driver dude. I had a fare jump in my car who immediately started berating about my car and how Uber doesn't allow drivers to use 2-door cars. This came as a surprise to me because I was not and have never been an Uber driver. I was just parked in front of the hotel waiting for a friend. You know, this has happened to me twice. The second time the girl was so glued to her phone that she didn't even make eye contact. I let it roll for a couple of seconds before I finally asked her why she was in my car. She looked up, wordlessly opened the door and disappeared into the night. Really makes you think about how the world has changed when it's normal to pop into a stranger's back seat, but weird to talk to them once you're in there. I know more than one person who would be that simultaneously inattentive, glued to their phone, and just mentally incapable of dealing with the situation as that last girl. Yep, some of us have really been cooked by our phones and modern services, haven't we? Huh. My father was a taxi driver for quite a while. It never happened to him, for which he was eternally disappointed. He did, however, once get run over by his own car. Okay, and now enough people are asking, so I can essentially give my off-topic answer. This was in the mid-90s in southern England. Like many taxis of that vintage, he was driving a diesel Citroën BX. Also, like those cars, it had been driven into the ground. In any case, he was dropping off a little old lady at her house at the top of a hill. Being a gentlemanly sort, he helped her out of the back seat and escorted her around to the front of the car. The handbrake cable snapped while they were doing that, and the car began to roll down the hill. He pushed the lady out of the way and got hit. The car dragged him about 100 yards down the road before a guy out on a run was able to jump in and put his foot on the brake. He was mostly okay. He had pretty severe friction burn and road rash down one of his legs and up his back. He had to have x-rays on his ribs too, but they turned out not to be broken or cracked. The little old lady threatened to sue because in his haste to get her out of the way he pushed her over and she broke her wrist. Old bones, presumably. Fortunately, the company's solicitor was able to head that off. He could make the case that he'd saved her life, I suppose. When I found out later, I'd have been 14 or 15, I laughed my butt off. I mean, who gets run over by their own car? It didn't take long to realize how lucky he'd been, though. One time after a work party, a bunch of co-workers and I were going to a different bar and we needed to take cabs. A few of us got into one and the rest into another. One of my co-workers told our cabbie, "Hey, if you can beat that cab, I'll give you an extra $20. The cabbie smiled in the rear view and said, "Okay, buddy," and started weaving between cars until he got in front of the other cab. Then he perfectly timed it so he could get the other cab stuck at a red light while he just made it past. With that head start, he really had no need to rush and he calmly got us to the bar first. I think he really enjoyed it and got a pretty nice tip for such a short trip. I was driving in London, utterly confused, as this was my first drive on the left side of the road and pre-GPS, so I had absolutely no clue how to get where I needed to be. So I stopped a black cab, a taxi, and asked him to chaperone me to the address. "Follow my car," he shouted, and set off at a breakneck speed down taxi lanes, weaving in and out of traffic. Remember that all black cabs are identical and London is teeming with them. I've never been so focused or frightened in my life. Once at port in Spain on deployment, we were late in getting back to the ship, so we jumped in a cab and said, "There's a good tip your way if you get us there before 10:30. We were there by 10:15 and it was the scariest car ride of my life. It was amazing. I was never told to follow that car, but I was sitting at the Whataburger drive-thru one night and a guy jumped into my car and said, "I'm not going to rob you or anything, but we need to get the frick out of here right now. 2 guys just ran me off the road." I thought he was full of crap, so I started to argue with him when I noticed 2 huge dudes pulling a tire iron out of the trunk of a car. One of them pointed at my car and said, "There he is." They started running towards us, so I took the frick off. They gave chase, but I had a head start and I knew the neighborhood. I was driving way too fast for those streets and I hit a speed bump way too hard, but that head start gave me enough time to turn down a side street and kill the lights. I saw them pass the street in the rearview mirror and waited a while until I dropped the guy off at his friend's house a block or 2 away from where we'd hid out. I apologized for not believing him and he thanked me for getting him away. So this kind of flips the formula a bit, but my partner and I had some guy take off on us on foot and we were chasing him down a semi-major road, but he was smoking us. Some random person in a minivan pulled over, yelled "jump in" and then dropped us off just in front of him. The guy was totally gassed by that point and just went prone on the ground when we jumped out. Seriously, it was like something in a movie. I drove Uber for a little while in New Orleans. I don't recommend it, and immediately after dropping someone off in the French Quarter, I had a woman jump in the back with a 6-inch bedazzled set of heels and yell, "Follow that car!" It turned out she was working at a local exotic dance club and had left her phone in the car of a guy she wasn't keen to see again. Unfortunately, we couldn't catch up to him, so I just took her back to her place of work. A friend driving a cab had this happen once. It was college students out on the town, and their friends got into a cab just prior to them. Yes, he chased it to wherever they wanted. They tipped him nice, he said. It was very anticlimactic, though. So I was actually the person who jumped in the car and said, "Follow that bus," and then, "Try to get to the next stop before the bus, please. It's important." I'd forgotten my phone, and that was the only thing I could think of. There was no way I'd outrun the bus. I had to cross a big boulevard and wait at the traffic light. And after that, it was a long stretch where I'd stand no chance. The guy actually made it and even told me to just go and not pay anything. To be fair, it took him like a minute or 2 anyway, but still. So cheers to you, random, genuinely nice taxi driver. You're a gentleman and a scholar. My ex had to chase down someone's boyfriend in his cab because the runaway boyfriend stole $500 in cash. Huh. A man was trying to pick up some garbage. He was a dumpster trucker or whatever, and his pal drove off thinking he was in the back. The man ran to my car, kept knocking on my window and said to follow that truck in a voice so loud New York City could hear, and he hopped in. I'm pretty sure I drove a red light to get to the dumpster truck. He paid me a $20 though, so it was worth it. What happens to relationships after one partner is diagnosed with a personality disorder? I have schizoid personality disorder. I'm 48. I've not dated since 1992. If she hadn't asked me, I probably would never have dated, but my curiosity got the best of me. I'm also chronically unemployed. I've never been able to keep a job, mostly because I don't build relationships with my coworkers. School was a disaster, probably for the same reason. I don't seem to be interested in things the way other people are, so I'm impossible to motivate. I was recently diagnosed with avoidant personality disorder. I'm 28. I grew up with the message that intimacy equals surrendering all control to the other person, and I was never able to trust my parents or family members because I knew they were more concerned about themselves than me. As an adult, I've always tended to lose myself in relationships. I've lost sight of my own wants and needs and formed myself around the wants and needs of my friends and partners, whilst feeling resentful for being unable to show the real me to anyone. Currently, I have no real friends because I find that crap exhausting, and I have a boyfriend, but I hate the way I absorb his values and opinions, and I miss being in touch with my true self like when I'm single. I desperately want to have meaningful relationships in my life, but I can't seem to escape the impulse to become subservient to whomever I allow close to me. and I end up resenting them as their identities take hold of me. I don't want to be alone, but alone is the only way I feel in control of myself. I can't say I'm a success story because I only recently received this diagnosis, and I still have a lot to work on, but at least I know what I'm dealing with now, and for me success will consist of learning how to actually share my true thoughts and feelings and opinions with people, which is really frickin' hard. I need to learn to trust myself even when others disagree with me. I think I have a long road ahead. For those of you wondering whether you have this disorder, if you have a history of trauma, it certainly increases the likelihood. Everyone is different though, and these are just my personal experiences. If you're identifying with the symptoms, my advice would be to find a good therapist and work towards finding your own voice, no matter how long or how many people have drowned it out. You deserve to be seen, heard, and known. I was suffering for years with unknown mental health issues and had a string of unhealthy relationships. I finally got diagnosed with bipolar disorder, started getting help and met an amazing person who supports me and puts up with my sometimes over-the-top mood swings with kindness and love. Sometimes I worry I'm putting too much on him, and I tell him this often. He always bats it away, saying I'm worth it. To be clear, I don't attack him or say horrible things to him, it's just my mood around him that can be a bit toxic. If I get upset, I can't really stop the process, and it can be very stressful, with me crying and unable to self-soothe and stuff. I do my best to keep these things to a minimum, and I'm getting better the more time goes by, and even just blurting out how I feel and getting a hug off him helps so much knowing I'm not being judged, even if I'm acting like a child. I still have a long road ahead, and maybe one day he'll realize it's too much for him, which I would totally understand. It's shown me what a person can be and what everyone deserves, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. I'm not unlovable just because I'm sick. Too right on that last message. I think the right partner can make a great difference for a lot of people, but even if you don't have one, the point I'm getting from the last two stories is that even if these disorders aren't curable, they are treatable and livable with the right methods. On to the next story. I believe that I have some or maybe a lot of narcissistic traits, never having been told by any of my numerous therapists, and I never realized it until I was with my now husband. I've come to learn through tons of self-reflection and awareness that it's due to my need for control because of an almost complete lack of boundaries as a child. I also have OCD tendencies and severe anxiety, and it's always manifested as severe irritability and anger and outrage at the tiniest of things. But I never in a million years thought that I was the problem until I'd been together with my husband for about a year and we were expecting our second child. I've been working meticulously on myself for the past 3 years and I have a long way to go, but now I can identify my triggers and also I'm much less demanding and controlling, and I'm aware of the subconscious emotional manipulation I was using on my husband. He was finally able to express how much it's affected him, and it really sank in for me the degree of damage I was doing to my relationships with others, my friendships and my children included. And I'm so lucky that I was able to see it and start healing so that I didn't continue on that path and hurting those I love. Well, my father's a psychopath who once told me that psychopaths don't like being called that. He'd consider his greatest success that of being able to hold down a marriage with a kid, along with multiple girlfriends. I mean, that's very impressive, but not in a good way. Schizoid personality here. What are these relationships you speak of? My relationships haven't changed, but knowing how other people think makes getting by easier. Knowing you're schizoid doesn't really help in my experience. Schizoids are pretty insular and self-reflective, so we know how we operate without a diagnosis. By schizoid standards, I've been very successful at dating. By normal person standards, I'm still well below average. But I find a diagnosis is very helpful for them. A few months in and they tend to have a lot of questions, but even just a Wikipedia entry on the disorder helps a ton. I've been diagnosed with antisocial personality. Honestly, I hide it. No way anyone can look at you the same way if you confess. I have a close friend who admitted to me that he had a diagnosis of antisocial personality, and honestly I was very surprised, but it didn't change how I felt about him. It actually helped me understand him a bit better in some ways, or at least understand that I might never fully understand him and learn to be okay with that. To say that I've had a diagnosis or two, or been through the ringer a bunch, and have had to deal with the repercussions of that would be an understatement. What I can say though is that when I finally addressed it to the people I trust and care about, it lifted a great weight. I guess my advice would be just own it, don't sugarcoat it, joke about it, and overall let loved ones know that you recognize the behavior and move forward with the assumption that it was a learning experience and people progress. Often, it makes you a much better person. I'm dating a woman with borderline personality disorder. I've known her for 8 years. I've been seeing her for a year and a half, and we've been officially dating for a year. It's hard, but the most rewarding relationship that I've been in. Treatment is definitely key with bipolar disorder. I just can't stand it when I hear people saying that someone with BPD can't have a fulfilling relationship. I swear that's one of the reasons my girlfriend thinks she isn't worthy. I'm never going to stop treating her like gold. She does the same for me. My fiancée has BPD. I'd never tell her, but I came really close to leaving multiple times for the things she did to me. But it's by far my happiest relationship now that she's treating it, and I've dealt with my own resentment. But we only made it because she recognized what she was doing to me and sought help. Really nice to see this question. I've been with my boyfriend for more than 5 years and was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder about 2.5 years into our relationship. Before my diagnosis, even though we got along amazingly and communicated well, and were generally happy, I'd find myself throwing toddler-like tantrums at any perceived or imagined slight. I hated this about myself. I thought I was a bad person because I just couldn't control myself. My partner happens to be an amazing people reader. He just naturally seems to pick up on people's personality and intentions as easily as I notice hair color. He was nothing but understanding. Even though we had little education of mental health, we both knew something was off, and he was a constant support as I sought out treatment. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and given a therapist who specialized in PTSD in veterans. Turns out a lot of my flare-ups were somehow similar to PTSD flashbacks. I was taught a bunch of techniques to use when I felt myself starting to flare out. It was also the first time I realized that my parents had been incredibly emotionally negligent, to the point where I hadn't learnt to deal with emotions. What was accidentally taught instead was that if I was angry or sad, I was about to be yelled at. It's taken 3 years, but I found the right combo of meds. I'm not cured, and I'm definitely not perfect, but I don't have flare-outs anymore. Sure, I sometimes raise my voice when I shouldn't, or I get into a stupid argument with my boyfriend, but I'm working on myself every day and we're super solid and super in love. I'm actually typing this besides him aboard a ferry on our way to what will hopefully be our new life. In 3 hours, I'll be doing the entrance exam for a college program that I'm really excited about, and afterwards we're checking out the shop he'll be managing in September. We have a cat and a dog together, we illustrated a book together, found a 20,000-year-old fossil together, and foraged together at least once a week. I have schizoid personality disorder, and it's not really that interesting. I was also diagnosed with anxiety, depression, and schizophrenia, so those took priority. I didn't even realize I had it until I reread an old document years later. There's no real treatment for it, but finding out helped me understand myself better. Also, if you get a mental evaluation done, you should really get a professional to interpret it. I haven't had much success in relationships, but I haven't really tried either. After being diagnosed, I accepted that someone would have to be damn near perfect for a relationship to feel worth it for me, and that person might not exist. I'm alright with that for now. Don't worry, it doesn't sound like you're too much more picky than a lot of us are in the modern age of dating. Way too many of us look for near perfection. Actually, what's been really nice about this question is seeing the accounts of really great and patient partners who are capable of appreciating what is awesome about their spouses and romantic interests despite the tougher times. ADHD and medication has made a huge impact on my relationships. I was diagnosed in college since my dad didn't believe in mental health disorders at first. I was ashamed of struggling with basic things that everyone else seemed to do so naturally, like sitting still during meetings at the ripe age of 21, or listen to and remember short instructions from 1 minute to the next. Even just processing was a nightmare. A baby in a pool in front of me flipped on a floaty boat, and I stood there letting the baby struggle for a solid 5 seconds before a panicked mum next to him turned around and flipped him back, and I managed to process, oh, that baby was in trouble. I generally did okay in school, but teachers always had to give me an extra 5, 10, or 30 minutes on a test after everyone else had finished, even on exams that were easy for me. By college, I no longer received extra time and my grades started sinking quick despite my best efforts. Taking meds felt like looking at everything with your first pair of glasses after years of foggy vision. I realized some people banked on my short memory to steal from me. People would ask to borrow something mid-conversation, like a wallet, iPod, my homework, and my books, and just never give it back, or like with the wallet, try to return a different item. Because I could never remember what was mine in detail and I was ashamed to admit it, I just got used to things going missing. It was one hell of a wake-up call when certain friends were surprised I actually asked for my stuff back, or when they handed me the wrong item and I corrected them. My family got angry multiple times when they said that I'd promised X and I pointed out that it was actually YZ. I began to paper trail everything. These days I live by my list and my schedules. I was still a little late to everything, but my work became much better quality. I'd remember what people said to me from one day to another, so I felt like I was actually getting to know people, really know them. one day to the next. I started getting obsessed with people's stories and I made some close friends for the first time, and after the initial shock, I even got to know my family, as weird as that sounds. I made huge strides in my career and my ADHD suddenly became a superpower. I could take random thoughts into creative solutions. My hyperactiveness became initiative and enthusiasm. My paper trail has covered my butt more times than I can count, and I've been known as one of the most reliable people in my circle, if you can forgive me being 10 to 15 minutes late every time. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. No antisocial disorder, but a very antisocial person. I'm a diagnosed autistic with chronic depression due to childhood mistreatment. Where to start? I have this intense need to be alone, yet I hate to be lonely. I want to have friends, yet I hate any form of socializing. I feel like an empty shell. I combine different pieces of behavior and information to form some sense of me. I feel like I'm a different person depending on whom I interact with, like some B-movie actor. So I hide. I hide everything that might make me different. Sometimes I fail, the mask cracks, and when that happens I avoid or ghost those people. I have no social instinct, everything needs to be done consciously. I understand that's my burden, the worst part is the loneliness. No matter how loving and understanding my friends, family, and partner are, there's a lingering loneliness I can never shake off. I know they love me and I try to too, but the majority of the time it just doesn't seem to reach me. No sense of guilt to be found either. It's so hard to explain. I see it as most people's emotions, dreams, souls, or whatever make them floating in huge strings of soap bubbles on the winds of life. You know, those kinds of bubbles that kids blow. When meeting others, the balls bounce against each other, and when they become friends, the soap bubbles stick. And sometimes when we truly love each other, our soap bubbles merge together into a bigger one. Now, I'm not in a ball of soap, I'm in a hard plastic ball, but I can see and understand the other ones. I can see their dreams and their beings, they're sticking to me, yet they'll never merge with me. Is that still true understanding? Something somewhere is disconnected, yet I can see the green grass on the other side never to be reached. Despite the screwed up mess that I am, I found an equally messed up person. She suffered from physical and verbal attacks herself. We have great comfort and understanding in each other through trauma. She's my people shield, since just existing on this earth for 5 hours drains all of my energy to live here. I know it's very hard on her. One day I'm king of the world, the other a paranoid maniac, but being with her I finally understand what happiness can be. I just wish I had some turn-off button that anyone could flick when I feel an episode coming up. Borderline personality disorder here, also known as she's a psycho witch, stay away from her in common media. I started my current relationship before I'd been diagnosed. I'd cheated on my previous 2 boyfriends and gotten together with the guy I cheated with. He got me to realize that my brain wasn't doing normal things. Turns out sabotaging your own life and having panic attacks at the thought of people cancelling plans isn't a normal person thing to do. So I went to the doctor and got diagnosed with BPD. I'd already gotten a diagnosis of depression, generalized anxiety disorder, and social anxiety disorder in the past and was struggling with them at the same time. Getting diagnosed made everything easier. Suddenly I knew why I panicked every time people cancelled plans, why my emotions seemed to never match the situation, and why they were so strong. Why I decided to sabotage every relationship I had by cheating, and knowing the reason behind the actions meant that I could get better and work to control my brain instead of it controlling me. He helped me work on my issues and stuck by me, helped me move out of my parents' place, which meant getting away from the conditions that had caused a lot of my mental health problems in the first place. Turns out that getting away from the source of your bullying really helps with recovery. We're still together 5.5 years later and looking to buy a house together soon. We own cats and have talked about and ultimately decided to wait another 5 years before starting a human family. ADHD here. Getting Adderall changes your grades from Fs to As. I thought I was just dumb. Turns out I'm really smart and I just needed help focusing. I thought about getting screened for ADD or ADHD because whenever I read about their symptoms, I'd constantly just go, this would make a lot of sense. However, I've also been diagnosed with high-functioning autism, which also explains a lot of things about me. And at the screening for that, the person said, "Yep, you're autistic, not ADD." I have PTSD. Open and honest communication is the key to successful relationships. You see it thrown around so often because it's true. Seeing a therapist has been the biggest success, though. I found out I have terrible codependency. I used to get upset, anxious, or jump through hoops trying to cheer up my significant other when I noticed that he was down, to the point of getting upset if he didn't respond well to my efforts. For anyone relating to this is codependency. Mine was caused by my parents constantly making me responsible for their moods. Your mood should rely on you only. Expecting the moods of others to be a certain way so you can feel good is a toxic trait. The advice that worked for me is to remember to give each other space when this happens. Now when I see that my significant other is down, I give him space. I cook our dinner, clean up, and then go do my own thing, whether that's gardening, watching something, or reading. Ever since I've started, I've noticed a lot of tension has been squashed. The biggest success was our bedroom life, though. Almost every time we did the deed, my PTSD alarms were going off, and when I finally told him about it, it was during the heat of an argument, so it came out all wrong and I basically passed a complex onto my significant other where he was worried about it every time we did the deed. He stopped instigating it for a while because of it. This gave me some really mixed feelings, even to the point that I'd convinced myself that he was cheating on me. This was what led me to my first appointment with my therapist. Communication was thrown out, but she also gave me pointers on healthy, open communication. Like one person speaking, one listening, and the one listening not needing to immediately jump to the defense, but rather just trying to jump to an understanding of one another. Since then, our bedroom life is basically as strong as it was during the honeymoon phase. It feels like I've been reborn since going to therapy. Yeah, the diagnosis is not going to fix everything, but it does seem to unlock a greater openness and give you tools for dealing with issues like this one when they come up. And thankfully in this case, it wasn't insurmountable. Happy for you! I have a suspected dissociative personality disorder that stems from some very serious childhood trauma. I've gone through toxic relationships that went both ways, me checking out and letting people treat me however they wanted, even as far as severe physical attacks to just using me for money and doing the deed. 3 years ago, I met my now husband and he called me out on my crap. When I disassociate, he somehow has figured out how to bring me out of it, which takes a lot of patience and kindness from his part. He made me see through my own bullcrap and to want to be better. So I started with medication, started thinking things through, and started truly facing the trauma that caused me to be this way and cope in healthy ways. It nearly broke us. 3 years later, and while that's not a lot of time, I haven't disassociated in a year. When someone upsets me, I can calmly talk about what it was and why it upsets me, and get through it instead of shutting myself down and functioning on autopilot, where honestly I'm heartless. It took a lot of work, a lot of fights. Finally learning to cry again, finally digging to the bottom of it. I'm nowhere near done, but now I want to work it all out. I want to be better. It sucks sometimes, honestly, but if I need to rant, he listens. If I need a hug or cuddle, he's right there. And I'm there for him too. I don't know if I'm a success story or this is the beginning of a success, but I'm determined for the first time in my life not to let this personality disorder be an excuse for bad behavior. One of my good friends is diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, and he's very open about it and has stated he had to learn empathy. He's very self-destructive, but he's the most reliable person I know, and there are many people in his life that would do anything for him, myself included. His transparency helps us understand his behavior, and he is always open to discussing how his actions have made people feel. Literally all of my relationships were a hot mess before I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder in 2017. I'd been through 3 divorces, broken up with my daughter's father, and totally messed up a perfectly fine potential long-term relationship with someone I really liked very much. Meds, therapy, a DBT therapy app on my phone, and an awareness of what is me and what is my BPD, and I've so far managed to not make any horrific mistakes in my current relationship. He's amazing, and I'm pretty motivated to spend the rest of my life with him. What helps me the most, other than meds, has been learning to self-soothe. I can't stress that enough. If I feel afraid of being abandoned, I can't put that off on him, other than maybe ask for a bit of extra reassurance. I had to learn to give myself positive self-talk, and to learn and practice grounding and coping skills. He's there to support me and accept me, not fix me or be a punching bag for my insecurities. Diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder a good while ago, it hasn't prevented me from having good relationships with people. I'm fairly charismatic and likable. I realize saying that is a bit on the nose, but genuinely I don't believe that it's ever been the reason for any of my relationships ending. At my therapist's behests, I do make sure to tell anyone that I get into a serious relationship with that, yes, I've been diagnosed, and these are some behaviors that you should watch out for. I'm manipulative, and it's hard not to be. You figure out how people are going to react to things in the course of normal interaction, and once you know that, how do you not press the buttons that get the reactions you want? Sometimes it can be a hurdle, having a partner watching for manipulative behavior, even when there isn't any, and I really have to try and understand my partner's emotions. But aside from that, I've had plenty of good relationships since being diagnosed. Did your bully thrive or crash after they left school? She did an insane amount of growing up during college, including having to uproot her whole life to care for her family after her mum died suddenly. She reached out to me and others I know personally and directly addressed the bullying. We went out to lunch, she bought, and she was incredibly honest, apologizing and acknowledging what she did and why it was wrong. She's now running a successful animal rescue organization with her long-term boyfriend, and I wish her nothing but happiness. Went to college, got into smack, lost his scholarship and got kicked out. Last I saw, he's working construction and is making duck faces on his profile picture on Facebook. He drove drunk, got in a wreck, and is now paralyzed from the waist down. He's still a bully, but now he's an online bully. The accident seems to have made him feel even more justified in being a prick. One is long dead from a substance deal gone bad, another is a big-bellied deputy sheriff who was kicked off the force after decades of questionable behavior. In jail for attacking his girlfriend. Thankfully, she survived. The boy bully married the girl bully. They had a kid and then divorced. Shocking. Mine too, except for the divorce part. I hope mine raised their kid to be nicer to weirdos than they ever were. He's in Leavenworth serving a life sentence for murder. No one was surprised when they found this out. I'm going to be honest, I'm a bit disturbed by how many bullies apparently went on to kill people. Same thing for my middle school bully. Currently in jail for a murder at a substance deal gone wrong. He was the driver but still caught the murder charge. It was crazy. I saw an article about how someone my exact age from my hometown was arrested for murder and made a joke about how I probably knew them. It was my middle school bully. He was killed shortly after being released from prison. He apparently had a beef with someone and went to their house with a piece. He kicked in their front door and was immediately shot and killed. There you go, kids. The mentality of using force to get what you want, even if you get away with it a bit in school, just isn't worth it in the long run. 4 of our 9 stories are about these people going to prison and sometimes not making it to their 30s because of this way of thinking. He died the summer after graduating high school, mixed too many substances and booze at a party. Very sad for his younger brother, who was a great person despite his brother. I kid you not, we had a 5-foot-tall bully in our school. He gained favor with some of the bigger bullies, and I suppose that afforded him carte blanche to act like them. Anyways, a few short years after high school, he messed with the wrong guy at a party, and they followed him home and shot him dead on his mum's front lawn. Not to the same extent, but there was someone like that at my school. Short little dude who got a big man complex because of the bigger bullies he rolled with. At an after-grad party, he got jumped, and someone took a metal rod and branded his leg after they dipped the rod in the fire. After that incident, he works for a non-profit for kids with troublesome home situations. Makes me wonder what he had going on behind the scenes. His father was caught stealing millions from the community. Dad was a wealth manager, and all his clients were friends and neighbors in a sort of small town. The family was really put through the ringer of embarrassment, and the bully was a wreck for a long time. I guess he realized all the wealth and arrogance that he grew up with was stolen from everyone he knew. I saw him years later and it was like seeing a different person. He had changed his name, walked differently, and held himself with a different posture. We spoke for a few minutes and it was almost like he was genuinely interested in me. He didn't go out and say sorry for what he had done, but it seemed like he wanted to, but thought it would be tacky. Maybe I'm reading too much into that interaction, but it was a little weird. It was like he'd been forcing himself to be an actual nice guy. The kid who used to beat me up every day in 3rd grade, I heard crashed a motorcycle and lost both his testes. So he's got that going for him, which isn't nice. He now owns his father's huge, massively lucrative construction company, which is exactly what he said he was going to do and also let us know how much richer he was going to be than any of us. So yeah, it sucks because it came true. Mine became a professional football player in the NFL. I get to watch him on TV now. Frick. My bully from elementary school through high school served prison time for embezzlement. They beat a fellow substance dealer to death during a transaction gone bad. He was convicted of 2nd-degree murder with depraved indifference. Then the State Court of Appeals changed the law interpreting the definition of the charge. The federal court vacated the conviction, finding that the defendant was factually innocent of depraved indifference murder. He agreed to plead guilty to the lesser charge of manslaughter, so he'd already served 10 years and was released after that plea. Judging from his Facebook posts, I know his brother, he has a girlfriend, a job, and he's kind of cleaned up his act. I saw him rush the field at an NFL game and get arrested. Good times. Prison for killing people by lighting a diner on fire. Back in the late 70s and early 80s. Just read it in the paper to no surprise. I think he set it on fire after hours just as arson, but didn't know some staff were trapped in the kitchen. Found out after he got out of jail years later in Pennsylvania, and is now in California in prison, but not sure of the crime. Opened a really stupid store in an overpriced mall in the 90s. Lost a crap ton of cash and then Control-Alt-Deleted himself. After years and years of being bullied in middle and high school by one particular guy, I took my dad's lawnmower in to get it serviced, and look who we have here. Good old racist F-boy Sean walks up to the counter covered in dirt and oil and sweat. He immediately knew who I was. Funny thing is, I'd hated this guy for so long. I even had a vision of snatching him by his shirt over the counter and beating his face into the ground. I was a skinny skater punk now. Nothing was said between us during that interaction other than the services I needed. When I went to go pick up the lawnmower a week later, he asked me to step outside. In my mind, I'm thinking, this is it. I'm going to pummel this guy. He lit up a cigarette and for about 15 minutes apologized for how he treated me in middle school and high school. He told me about how he was brought up and how he was never as tough as he made out. After high school, he went to the military and was forced to work with other races. He even explained that his hatred towards people that weren't white faded away because of the Marines. He said he'd been screwed over more by his own race now than others, and started to think about his ideology. He's a humble guy now, with regrets, but he's man enough to admit his faults. We shook hands and even hugged. I haven't seen him in about 10 years, but if I do see him again, I'll still shake his hand. For whatever fricking reason, he asked me out a few years after graduation. That guy bullied me. I had this happen to a friend. She ran into our mutual bully at a party in college. He was hitting on her and she was ignoring him. She finally told him to F off using his name. Apparently, he was shocked to realize she knew him. She apparently asked him why he thought she'd ever be interested in hooking up with someone who bullied her so much back in grade school. Apparently, his response was something like, "Wow, I was such a jerk back then." They murdered someone and are now in prison. She became an influencer and has tons of followers because people think she's really funny because of how stupid she is. She kinda has a Paris Hilton persona going on, very rich spoiled girl pretending to be stupid and knowing nothing about the world. It's not surprising to me at all that high school bullies can be good as influencers. They live for their crowd's validation, and now with the internet they can have much more than their local crowds. Mine is now some sort of spiritual guru. So judging by how many of these bullies just continue to not learn anything and keep to their exploitative ways, there's a fairly good chance that this is a grift rather than genuine spiritual reform, right? I mean, they could have had a revelation, but I'd be uneasy seeing a former bully in a position of power like this. My middle school bully from my class got hit by a car and didn't go to school for a whole year, then he skipped school for the next year, literally the entire year. Then he finally got expelled and I never saw him or heard anything about him from then on. He's on Facebook constantly crying about how unfair life has been to him. He also said he won't go to our 10-year high school reunion because he was bullied by the buttholes that are now organizing the reunion. When I commented and reminded him of how he bullied me, he just said, "At least I didn't make you as sad as they made me." Completely delusional. I kinda feel bad for him. The autistic kid beat him in Spanish class within an inch of his life. Flipped over the desk, picked the guy's body up and slammed him kidneys first onto one of the legs. Johnny was just your normal, happy-go-lucky video game fan. We went to see the original Mortal Kombat movie in theaters when it came out. It was my second movie-going experience ever. I was just a newly transplanted immigrant and Johnny was the only kid who didn't pick on me. He was cool. Johnny was heavy-set with glasses. Juan was in a gang. Real cholo-looking dude. He and his friends were terrors on the school. In retrospect, I'm sure Juan had a terrible upbringing because he took it out on everyone around him. For months, he kept picking on Johnny. Months. Juan was a scary guy and I'd gotten into my share of scraps, but I wanted no part of it with him. This behavior went unchecked. Juan broke John's glasses and it was just persistent. I don't remember all of it other than Johnny just becoming more and more reclusive with time, and he was always bruised in some way, shape, or form. One day in Spanish class, Juan said something to Johnny about his mum. This was before the bell rang for class to start. That was the final straw. I remember John letting out this guttural, primal scream and lunging from his desk towards Juan. Johnny began hammer-fisting Juan all over the head, his shoulders, and arms. Like fricking Goro would in Mortal Kombat. Just unleashing everything he had on this jerk gang kid. There came a point where Juan looked out of it, like a limp noodle. And that was when John, still possessed by his unrelenting rage, flipped the desk over and underhand flipped and body-slammed Juan onto one of the legs of the desk. Juan let out this horrible cry of agony, and that was that. The teacher walks in, they call the campus police, and the rest is a blur. I don't remember what happened to John after this, as I never saw him again, but I do remember hearing from an acquaintance back several years that Juan was in jail for aggravated robbery. I guess he didn't learn his lesson. Thank you, Johnny, for being a friend and for not judging me while I learned the language here and adjusted to my new life. I hope all is well with you. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Full ride scholarship through football to a D1 college, scouted by an NFL team in high school, just had to make it 4 years in college. Then he attempted the unspeakable act on a girl at the college, went on the run, had several warrants, got into an argument back in his hometown that led to a firearm discharge, and now he's in prison. So my bully was a guy, I'm a chick, and he was relentless. From kindergarten through middle school, peaked in middle school, he'd stick his leg out and trip me when I'd walk by, then laugh. Crap like that. He annoyed everyone. Imposed on your personal space, would tell lots about me to others so they wouldn't like me. It really bothered me deeply because I couldn't understand what I had done to have someone so adamant about humiliating and hurting me. Publicly, too. Well, after middle school, he disappeared to some other school, and I slowly repressed it all and forgot about him in my active thoughts. Then I got my first apartment with a friend and a real job and was going to college. I was sitting on my new couch in my new place watching To Catch a Predator, like everyone did back then. Next up on To Catch a Predator. And I hear his name. I hear the scumbag's name, and there he is, walking in to meet someone very inappropriate who he has very incriminating text conversations with. I couldn't believe it. I stood up and screamed aloud. I felt so vindicated for the feelings of hatred and inability to forgive him as a younger girl. Justice served. He's selling mobility scooters and supporting his stepchildren. He was bullied at home and I was an easy target. Back then I fantasized about revenge, and now I appreciate that he was crying out for help. I'm never going to be friends with him, but I'd shake his hand and wish him well any day. Mine became the CEO of the company he started in after college. He's the chairman of the local football team and runs the beach cleanup crew every month. Always has a smile and has clearly just kept on growing up. Local politician. I do fine now. I was a stupid kid that did stupid things to a boy who didn't ask for it. We ended up being friends after he had the courage to call me out. I got suspended and both of our mothers agreed to meet and to force us to spend time together to get to know each other. I never was more grateful to someone than those two women. My mum, obviously, but also his mum. She was a tall and fat lady who seemed really cold and severe at the first glance, understandable as I'd beaten up her son, but ended up being like a second mother to me. She showed me that even trashy humans like me can become better if given a second chance in the right conditions, and that lesson will stick with me forever. Agnes, I miss you. No idea. I left town and never looked back. My bully and his buddy drowned, and it made me sad that I'm a foreigner and didn't speak much English and couldn't defend myself much, so I just took it. This was in the late 90s and I've moved on, but he didn't get to. Got in an argument over a parking spot and got himself shanked to death. Many years after graduation, I found out that he became a local cop in the town we grew up in. It was the least surprising thing to everybody. He became a Disney Channel star, started a YouTube channel with creators, exploded, and now he's in boxing. Wait, Jake Paul? Yes, I did have to Google this commenter's sentence to get to the Wikipedia page, but that's at least a big name that I recognize. Well, if he's like any of the other child stars, he's statistically probably kind of unhappy, so you have your karma right there. My bully died from his substance addiction. Don't be a bully, get help in your area. If you go somewhere and they don't seem helpful, find another organization or walk into an emergency department and ask for help. There are good people out there working towards pro-social means. Don't give up. I saw him walking in front of my family's house, certain he was passing by, while I was playing with my daughter and her cousins. He gave me a little wave and I thought I'd just wave back just to be nice. He messaged me later on Facebook and said he's glad I'm doing better than him. Long story short, he told me his ex-wife and he are having a serious custody battle with their kid and recently got a DUI, which got him into a deeper hole. He basically said don't end up like him. As much as I hope he gets better, karma really is a witch. Not necessarily my bully, but this one kid at my school made everyone's lives miserable. He was an absolute bag of crap. Hadn't heard anything about him for years until I flicked on a Guy Ritchie film, and he was in it. Turns out he's now gone on to be a semi-successful actor. I actually hold no resentment because the kid was pretty messed up, his mum was dead and his father was this bullying alcoholic, so fair play to him for breaking the mold. He became good and now we are not beefing. He coasts on daddy's cash and is now one of the not too rich but still rich D-bags, revving a generic 2013 BMW M320 on all his Instagram stories. Became the president of a small Christian college. The worst one I've ever met in my life never exactly had his own comeuppance. His father was wealthy from being the assistant harbour master in one of the largest fishing communities in the country, so he never exactly had to work. From what I've heard, he lives off his family's wealth while being a hobbyist photographer. His parents did get divorced and his substance-addicted mother passed away. Another little monster who was a year older than me died at 21, when he fell off a 200-foot cliff while hunting with his girlfriend's family. This other kid who tormented me non-stop at Boy Scout camp enlisted in the army. He was injured and is now partially paralyzed, living a secluded lifestyle under his family's watch. The Boy Scout bully's close friend, who was very antagonistic, was busted 4 years ago during an FBI dark web sting operation for trafficking substances. He's awaiting sentencing. He ended up being my direct manager at a serving job, and to be honest, he was one of the best managers I've ever had. Well, I saw this question, so I just looked him up. He makes YouTube videos for work in the vein of Andrew Tate. He has 212 subscribers and lives in his mum's house. I recognized it from the videos. You know what? I don't care enough about them to keep tabs. I've grown into a healthier person than I used to be, and I like the distance between us. One of them died trying to bully a big tree while driving 50 miles per hour. The tree wasn't impressed and decided to bully him right on back by not moving out of the way just before the bully attempt. I'd like to hug the tree, but I don't know exactly where it happened. My elementary school bully, in South Korea for context, continued being the bully till high school. Somehow he ambushed and beat the untouchable student while this guy was alone. It turned out that the untouchable student was a Korean mafia son. A bunch of black cars parked up at his apartment. Burly guys armed with metal pipes and bats would constantly waltz around the neighborhood and make the bully's family life hell. The apartment neighbors got fed up being terrified of the mafia at their neighborhood, and the cops just flat out refused to show up until the mafia dispersed. So things got to the point where the neighbors pressured the bully's family to move out at once. Never heard of what happened after they moved, not entirely sure why the bully did that, maybe due to his pride, maybe a proof he is the jang, the old Korean term for a student who's the toughest and strongest brawler, who'd constantly challenge or be challenged by other classes and other schools. Mine got shipped off to Baghdad in the early 2000s and never came back. Mine always bullied everyone who wasn't a football player, jock, or cowboy. He honed in on me because I was a nerd and more feminine. Turns out he had major regrets about everything, and at his last class reunion, he was 2 years ahead of me, he tried apologizing to people, and a lot of people wouldn't forgive him for what he'd done. A lot of it was borderline charges that should have been filed against him. I'm pretty sure he put a couple of kids in therapy. Well, after a lot of people wouldn't take his apology, I guess he went into a fairly major depression and ended up Control-Alt-Deleting himself and left a letter stating that he hated who he was and how he treated people, and the pain he inflicted on everyone, and that he couldn't live with himself anymore. The really sad thing is I did run into him not too long before this and he did apologize to me, which I'm surprised that he recognized me because I'm a female presenting person now. I'd accepted and told him I didn't hold anything against him. He really seemed sincere and like he'd changed. But I understand how some couldn't forgive the trespasses he made upon them. Sad all the way round. This is why everyone just needs to be nice to everyone, even if you don't like them or like what they do or whatever. These stories always end in unnecessary sadness or the end of a life. He was an anti-bully. He was built like a tank and had crazy eyes. Everyone was afraid of him, even the biggest, baddest bullies. Yet he'd help anyone in need and hated bullying. If you got messed with, you could ask for his help even if you didn't know him. He was a giant with a heart of gold. Last I heard of him is that he was a private contractor in a war zone and got mixed up in smuggling. He later fell off the face of the earth. Rumors say that he got shot down in the middle of nowhere. Others say that he's sipping pina colada on a tropical beach with no extradition treaty. He wasn't exactly my bully, but we had a few fistfights. He bullied pretty much everyone else who was afraid of him. He started to take substances at the age of 13 or 14. At 18, he had the face of a 60-year-old with cancer. He was in prison, rehab, prison rehab and went to prison again because somehow he had a sword and destroyed a kid's bike. His parents locked him outside when they weren't at home because he stole and sold everything to have money for substances. One day, when we were about 17 or 18, suddenly everyone stopped talking about him. We lived in the same neighborhood, and the street that he lived on was quiet. People started to go outside without fear, so he's probably dead or very far away now. When did you see someone so ungrateful they made you just give up on being nice? Today is my niece's birthday and she just went to college, so I thought I'd get her a laptop for her birthday. Now, I'm a student myself, but I still want to give her something special. So I searched for a great used laptop and I found a decent Toshiba Satellite. I sold my PlayStation Portable and some other things so that I could afford it. So we were there at the dinner table opening presents. She opened mine and had this grim look on her face. "Oh, this is it? I thought you'd buy me a new one." "You know, I can't afford one. This is the best I can do." "I want a brand new one, not this. This sucks. Worst present ever." She then shoved the laptop and box across the table and it fell on the floor. I picked it up and just walked out. My cousin tried to stop me and I just said, I will never give her anything ever again. She even had the nerve to call back and ask for the laptop. Apparently her parents had punished her for her behavior and she'll now have to buy her own things. No handouts or gifts. My friend bought it back from me as a favor. He helped to pick it out and knows how much I bought it for. The profit was only about $10, roughly. Update, my niece called again this morning asking for the laptop because she'll need it for college and her parents are still holding firm on her never being handed out stuff while she's there. No apology yet, only demands. Her brother said I'd cave and give it to her. Frick no and frick you, niece. I always wanted to believe this kind of behavior only happens on television. I mean, you're getting free stuff, how can you not like that? I get socks for Christmas and I get fricking excited. Frickin' free socks, man. A couple of years ago, a friend and I were driving across the country in a big moving truck full of my mum's furniture. We'd been on the road for about 18 hours on the second to last day of the trip, and stopped at a rest stop to stretch our legs and use the bathroom. Sitting at the rest stop late at night was an entire family, dad and 2 young kids, and their car, which was obviously broken or otherwise not working. Feeling like I should try and help, I asked the father what was wrong, and he told me they'd run out of gas and just needed to get to the next town, which was about 40 miles away. I couldn't leave the rest stop with that family stranded, so my friend and I got back in the truck and drove the 40 miles to the next town, bought gas and a can, and drove all the way back in a huge moving truck. The whole trip back and forth took us about an hour and a half, and by the time we got to the rest stop, we were both about to pass out. Well, the family was still there waiting, and I hopped out to give them the gas they needed so badly. I handed the can to the father, and he looked at me and said, "I'd rather have the money." This caught me off guard as the money wouldn't have helped get them anywhere, but it was then that it dawned on me that he never wanted gas to begin with, and he probably even had some in the car. He was just fishing for cash and using his kids as the bait. I felt really bad for the mum as she was just looking at me the whole time with this expression of, "I'm so sorry." I was at loss for words, since the dad didn't even want the gas we'd just driven over an hour to get for them. I just set the gas can on the ground, got back in the truck, and left feeling like a giant idiot. This is why so many people are jaded about helping out other people. Admittedly, myself at times too. It's gross behavior and a terrible example to set for your kids. My cousin gave my son a broken PlayStation 2 for his birthday. I fixed it. I just needed to clean the optic on the player. Then the cousin asked for it back. I absolutely told him no. I delivered a pizza in a low-income type apartment complex. The total was $18 something and she just handed me a 20 rolled up and told me to keep the change. I turned around and started walking down the stairs back to the parking lot while unrolling the $20 to put in my wad of cash when I find a $100 bill wrapped up inside of the 20. Immediately I turned around and went back, knocked and said, "I don't think you meant to include this inside the 20, as I extended my hand towards her with a $100 bill in it. She immediately started screaming at me about how she didn't give me no $100 tip and that I'm lucky she doesn't call the police. Slammed the door, then called my pizza shop to complain. I told the manager the whole story. She was put on the do not answer list. Crazy lady. I had something similar happen at an ATM. The guy before me had pulled out what looked like $400 and then walked away without taking the cash. I didn't realize what had happened at first, so by the time I put 2 and 2 together, he was out of the store. I grabbed the money, ran after him, and caught him in the parking lot. I handed him the cash and he violently grabbed it from me and started talking crap about me trying to steal his money. He started getting in my face when his friend mentioned that before he'd ever met me, he was $400 down. Then I came along and he's back to even, ending with, "What the frick is wrong with you?" The guy never thanked me, but his friend did. When we were young, we were very poor. My sister's birthday was coming up. I think she was about 7. There was no money to buy gifts, but my mother had a small piece of white satin cloth and a box of tiny little pearl beads. She had hand-sewed this beautiful little wedding gown for my sister's doll and sat up night after night hand-sewing these tiny little beads on the dress. When my sister was given it for her birthday, she threw it across the room in disgust, saying, "I don't want that, it's my old dolly." I'll never forget the heartbreak on my mother's face. The stories in this thread make me afraid that when I have kids, they'll be spoiled brats. Oh, don't be afraid. It's something you can control. It's up to parents to teach their kids grace and humility. Look, my parents didn't say no to my siblings or I very often. We were spoiled, but we certainly weren't brats about it. And I think there were 2 key things to this. First, before we were allowed to play with any toy or gift we received, we had to write a thank you note for it. And nothing low effort in the thank you notes. They had to be sincere and take up the whole gosh darn card. Doing that makes you think long and hard about why someone would choose something for you, what they intended, and what you like about a present that might otherwise befuddle you. Second, if you didn't react with grace and gratefulness, you didn't get to keep the gift. End of story. If you reacted like a real brat, you didn't get to keep any of them. They were harsh with this rule too. Even a sour face could get the gift revoked. As a kid, you learn real quickly that gifts are a privilege and a gesture. You always respond with a smile and a heartfelt thank you, even if your odd relative just gave you items from her pantry wrapped. She gave them generously, you respond kindly. A girl in my high school received a used car on her 16th birthday. She was unhappy with the fact that it was a 3-year-old car. She intentionally totaled it. Her thinking was that if she totaled this one, her parents would have to buy her a new one. She didn't get a new car and had to ride the bus. I knew a girl who did that too, except with a nice little Ranger. It was a couple of years old, but had all of the bells and whistles except 4-wheel drive. That wasn't good enough for her, so she wrecked it intentionally. She fractured her neck and had to walk around with a cervical collar for a couple of months. And then her parents bought her a piece of crap 1980 Ford Escort. When I was 15, a girl in my driver's ed class turned red and stood up. She put her hands to her throat, couldn't make a sound. Her eyes looked crazy. She was choking on a piece of candy. Everyone looked for 1 beat, 2 beats, and I'm like, what the hell? And I stand up, walk over 2 tables, and give her the Heimlich. On the second attempt, the candy flies out like 10 feet like in a movie or something. She starts gasping and bawling. It's a big scene. She thanks me. The next day at class, when our parents are picking us up, she's walking down the hall with her white trash mum. They walk up to me. I'm expecting a thank you from the mum or something. I've never seen this lady before, and as she gets close, she starts yelling, "What did you think you were doing? You aren't a doctor or a nurse. You could have broken her ribs. You're lucky I don't get a lawyer and sue your family. I still might." And it went on and on like that for about 5 minutes. I used to work for a local car dealership. I was selling the cheapest car on the lot to a dad and his daughter. It was a 2000 Daewoo for $3,000. She was so excited to have her own car, and it was what her dad could afford her. At the same time, another salesperson was selling a brand new Eddie Bauer Explorer to a dad as a present to his daughter. As I was presenting the Daewoo to the new owners, the daughter of the other dad comes in to see her new Explorer. She started an absolute tantrum and yells, "I didn't want an Explorer, I wanted an Expedition." I was really proud of the dad of the Explorer. As he walked back into the finance office, he changed the deal. He corroborated with the guy buying the Daewoo and switched the names. So the girl crying over her Explorer now had a crappy Daewoo, and the girl who was really grateful to have a car ended up with a fully loaded, paid-off Explorer. I would never have believed it if I hadn't been the salesperson. It does stretch credulity, as you say, but my god, that is one heck of a tale of instant karma if it's true. I can't ever imagine having that much money that I could laugh off an expense like that, but good on the guy for doing his best not to pass on rich person entitlement to his daughter. Valentine's Day 2004. Now, I've never given 2 craps about Valentine's Day, but my girlfriend at the time had never been in a serious relationship and wanted a special Valentine's Day. I was more than happy to oblige for her. That day, I went to the local flower nursery where I used to work and bought 24 red roses and grabbed an unused delivery invoice. I still had the uniform, just a t-shirt and hat, but enough to make me look like a legit delivery person. I then spent my entire paycheck on gifts for her and food for dinner. Everything. Balloons, decorations, red and pink cutesy crap, and several expensive gifts including an iPod and a new camera. I went back to her house and decorated everything, transforming her kitchen and living room into what looked like a display at the mall. I even did the rose petals on the bed thing because I was sure my efforts would lead to a romantic evening. I looked up her class schedule to figure out where her class was, we had different majors, and I proceeded to burst in, pretending to be a delivery person. I gave her the roses and a teddy bear in front of her entire class, even going so far as to make her sign the fake delivery invoice. It was her last class of the day, so I knew she'd be heading home afterwards. I raced out of there so I could get there first, change, and start cooking dinner. I got there maybe 20 minutes before she did, and everything was going to plan. She was upset when she walked in the door. "Why didn't you wait for me after class?" she said. I told her I wanted to start dinner before she got home and finish decorating the house. "Oh, I really wanted to go out for dinner tonight. Can't we go out for dinner?" I explained that I was going to make something special at home and had in fact already started cooking. She looked at the table full of presents and the house full of decorations and just sighed, disappointed. I really wanted this to be a special Valentine's Day, just this once. I was really hoping we could have a special day together, but I guess not. In short, spent $800 on Valentine's Day, put on a great show, and it wasn't good enough. Never again. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was younger, I worked at Blockbuster. I was the night shift manager, and one night I was working by myself when a customer walks up and handed me a woman's wallet. He says he found it on the ground. I peeked inside to find an ID and membership card so I could look up her account and phone number. Sure enough, she'd been in the store about 30 minutes earlier, so I gave her a call. She seemed pleased on the phone and said she'd be right in. Store policy for something like that was to lock the item in the safe until the customer arrives. I did so and went about my business. About an hour later, the woman comes in and asks for her wallet. I tell her it's going to be 15 minutes as the safe was timed and I asked her to wait. This was apparently unacceptable, and she asked if I could get it faster than that. I told her no and continued helping other customers while she waited. Once the safe beeped, I grabbed her wallet and handed it to her. I had to put a line of customers on hold while I did this because I wanted her out of the store ASAP since she had spent the last 15 minutes fuming and standing right next to my register. As soon as I hand her the wallet, she says, "My money had better be in there." I explained that honestly I had no idea as I didn't open it all the way, as her membership card was on an outer flap. This was one of those larger wallets that was more like a mini purse with lots of flaps and zippers and such. After handing it to her, I asked for the next customer in line to step up and basically tried ignoring her. Unfortunately, she began screaming, "My money is gone! You stole my money!" Which really surprised me as she was a pretty normal-looking soccer mom type. I asked the customer in front of me I'm helping to wait a second and explained to her that the wallet was handed to me and reiterated that I had not personally opened the wallet any further than the first flap. She starts screaming again, saying there were over $200 in it and that she was calling the police. I shrug and tell her to go ahead. At this point, I'm completely satisfied to ignore her. She walks to the back of the store and whips out her cell phone. I continue helping the line as the customers are looking back at this woman as she's loudly calling the cops. Most of the customers got up to the front of the line and went like, "What a witch," and that kind of comment. I just shrugged and smiled. After the line was cleared, the lady came back to the register and told me with a super smug look that the police were on their way. "Okay," I say, and I give her a "I don't give an F" shrug and ignore her while checking in movies. About an hour later, a cop finally enters the store. This lady has waited right next to my register again the entire time, and she starts waving at him and pointing at me the same time. I see the cop and roll my eyes and shake my head. He asks her to repeat her story, and as she's repeating it, he's almost completely ignoring her and watching the football game that we have playing on our direct TV kiosk. After she gets done, he looks at me, rolls his eyes, and asks, "Did you take the money?" "Of course not," I say. "I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do, ma'am," the cop says and leaves the store. As he leaves, he holds the door open for her and tells her to leave if her business is complete. I smiled super big, like a Cheshire cat big, and told her to have a super day as she left. After she left, I bought pizza with the $200 I took. I'm just kidding, but I almost wish that's how the story ended after she embarrassed me like that for close to 2 hours. I helped my workmate move house, hungover after far too much tequila. I moved all of his crap, his boyfriend's and his roommate's stuff, basically myself as they were all useless. Took almost 12 hours. That jerk didn't even buy me a beer, food, or anything all day. Then he fobbed me off when I asked for help to move myself. Then had the nerve to ask for help when he moved out again. I bought my cats some gourmet food and they looked at me like I was trying to poison them. Cretins. Well, on the one hand, I sympathize with you, but on the other hand, you probably should have seen that coming. I love cats, but they are complete jerks. This is one of my favorite stories of instant justice. My mother's friend threw his daughter a birthday party. This was a fairly affluent family, so she got a big party with all of her friends, and this girl got a lot of nice stuff. She got dolls, a dollhouse, various toys, and a frickin' horse, with all of the riding gear and the promise of lessons and everything she could ever need for that horse. This brat got what millions of little girls all over the country dream of, and you know what she did? She flipped the crap out because it was the wrong dollhouse. She got a horse, and she threw a massive, screaming temper tantrum over the enormous dollhouse. Now, I'll digress a little bit and tell you about her father. Her dad came from Africa to the US as a refugee. Most of his friends and family were killed. This guy not only competed in the Olympics, but worked his butt off to become a doctor of some kind. As one might expect, he did not take kindly to his daughter's obvious lack of appreciation for her privileged lifestyle, so he cut that crap right out. He cancelled the party right then. The guests still got to eat cake and keep their party favors on top of an apology for his daughter's behavior. He packed up all of the toys and took them back to the store. He took the horse back and grounded the crap out of his spoiled little girl. In short, guy buys daughter a horse and other stuff, daughter flips out over a dollhouse, and the guy takes everything back. I have quite a few I could tell about my little sister, but I'll stick with 2. My mum bought her numerous laptops, iPhones, and cameras on the condition that she took care of them. Every single one was broken in a month or 2. Bought her a $900 digital SLR that she knows I've been coveting for years because my sister claimed she was going to take a photography course at school. She got the camera, complained that she didn't get any other presents that day, used it for a day and then let it sit around for 6 months. She uses it now for pictures on her Tumblr, but she told my mum she intended to take a photography course and she can only use the damn thing on auto. For Easter, I spent a couple of $100 buying her tons of Hunger Games stuff and random stuff for an Easter basket because I stupidly wanted to do something nice, I guess. I just picked random stuff over the course of a few months that I thought she'd like. She was upset that my mum wouldn't be doing baskets anymore because she was 15. She threw a tantrum after she opened everything because Easter sucked because we wouldn't hide Easter eggs for her or hide plastic ones filled with money like her friends' parents did. She's 15 for frick's sake. I haven't gotten her a damn thing since. I bought my mum a MacBook Air to pay her back for years of caring for me, and my sister threw the biggest temper tantrum ever. She clawed at my mum's face and tried to steal her car because it wasn't fair that my mum got something nice for the first time ever. Literally ever. My sister has since accidentally broken her laptop hoping that I'd buy her one too. Not going to ever fricking happen. Whew, sorry, that turned into a bit of a rant. My older sister Amanda is extremely spoiled. My dad practically worships the ground she spits on. Well, she's about 9 years older than me, so of course she was able to do more things. I used to help my mum at a restaurant every day when I was about 5 to 8 years old. Because I was so young, people would give me tips throughout the day. When my mum's shift ended, she'd walk me next door to the bank and I'd deposit my earnings. By the time I was 8, I had a little over $800 saved up. May came around and my sister was going to turn 17. For her birthday, she wanted a crap ton of hairstyling stuff and makeup. Well, my father had other plans. He convinced me into letting him borrow my $800 and combined it with his $500. He then went out and bought a cheap car for $1,000 and used the other $300 for seat covers, new tires, and a new stereo. On May 5th, we gave my sister the car and she threw the biggest witch fit ever. She wanted nothing to do with the car, so she sold it for $700. Dad got his $500 back, Amanda got $200 to spend on hair crap, and I got nothing. Just a rant from an ungrateful jerk. My spouse used to have an old Mercedes E-Class. It was like 1995 or something. He wanted to give it away to my little cousin as a first car because it was safe, reliable, and my little cousin's parents couldn't afford to buy their kid anything big like cars. So we gave her this car and she freaked out like the niece in our first story did. She started going on about how we were going to go out and buy a new one and she wanted a new one too. So my spouse took the keys away from her and gave them to her older brother right in front of her. The reason we didn't give it to him in the first place was because he had an old Honda that he had paid for himself. However, it was falling apart and needed a lot of work to keep it safe. We even volunteered to pay for his insurance in his first year of college just to spite his little sister. Oh, that felt real good. We haven't bought my female cousin anything in over 3 years. We don't even send her a birthday card. If you act like that when someone gives you something, you clearly aren't worthy of anything. I work for a not-for-profit and we have cookouts for people in poverty. They complain so hard that we buy generic soda or don't have, quote, good cheese for their burgers. One time we gave away thousands of pairs of shoes in the city. The "what is this crap" complaints outnumbered the thank yous about 20 to 1. This is from people who came up without shoes to collect them. Well, this is embarrassing. When I was a kid, I was homesick from school one day. My mum told me she'd go rent a movie for me to watch. Expecting a cartoon, I got really excited since I loved cartoons, and back then they were seldom on TV. She came home and had bought a live-action film. I was so disappointed. I cried and yelled for a while and said I didn't want to watch it. She was like, "Fine, I'll watch it on my own." When she started watching it, I pretended not to watch, but I couldn't help not watching it. Turns out it was the best movie I'd ever seen. It made me both appreciate live-action films and convinced me my mum always knew what was best for me. The movie was Back to the Future. What crazy accusation did someone make up about you at work? I'm on the keto diet. That requires me to drink a metric crap ton of water, so I carry around a 1-liter Nalgene bottle at all times. I'm a mid-level manager at a 60-person company. At the end of the workday, on the way out, I pass the water cooler and I fill my bottle up for the commute home. Yesterday, I was doing just that when our office manager walked up and said the following: "You're leaving for the day. Water is for employees to drink when they're working in the office only." I laughed it off, finished filling my bottle and headed home. I genuinely thought she was kidding, or at the very worst having a crappy day and lashing out. She wasn't. Today I get into the office with an email from her to myself, my boss, who's our CEO and founder, and our HR person saying that I'm stealing from the company, that I didn't stop filling my water bottle and immediately apologize when confronted, and that she's officially reporting this behavior and asking to have it documented. Needless to say, we all had a pretty good laugh about it. My boss called me in hysterics and could barely form a sentence, he was laughing so hard. And somebody wrote, "Is proper hydration good for the company?" on my water bottle. Our office manager, however, is just walking by my office and glaring since then. In short, I'm the Daniel Ocean of our office water cooler. Ooh, update. This morning there was a fancy new Nalgene bottle on my desk, and the crazy office manager came by and said that she was having a crazy week and apologized. I showed her this comment, laughs were had, and all is now good in my office world. Time clock thievery while doing volunteer work. It was a simple volunteer gig, no major organization, and nobody was keeping track of hours for anything. It was not court mandated. We were cleaning up at the end of the day and I answered a phone call. The supervisor got all angry and said, "Get off the phone, that's time clock thievery." By God, this man can steal time itself. After working at Subway for 5 years, 3 of those as manager, I was accused of turning off the cameras in the store and getting blazed in the cooler. I quit shortly after. Turned out the owner was trying to set me up to fire me. I once used the phrase, "more than one way to skin a cat," around a manager who had never heard the phrase. She called me into her office later to ask why I was saying such a disgusting thing, accused me of being a sicko who killed animals, and then threatened to fire me if she heard anything like it ever again. I mean, I would hope that once it was explained that it was a common saying that they might back down, but I guess there are some cat people who would probably be incapable of hearing this without bursting into tears, so who knows. I was working retail at Best Buy at the time and they had me working in MP3 players and cell phones, despite the fact that DVDs and video games were really more my wheelhouse. But I went and worked where they told me and I did my job well. During Christmas season, it got really busy, so everyone was running around helping every department. I was hanging out in my own section when a woman came over, asked me about some headphones, and I helped her. She then asked me if the Dance Dance Revolution Mad Cats match she bought for her daughter was any good, and I asked if she has any of the games. She didn't. I showed her a slightly more expensive but better copy of a Konami mat with a game, and she thanked me and she didn't even know she needed a game with it and went off. My department manager came up behind me, tells me to meet him in the break room in 5 minutes, and rips into me. He says that the department with the best revenue gets bonuses. It's only true for him, by the way, not for the rest of us below him, and tells me off for helping customers in other sections get more expensive things. He says he'd be shocked if I made it past winter. I just say, "Yes, sir," and go back to work. Come January, I get fired by department manager recommendation. So, when you go to Best Buy, know that all the departments have their own agendas with you. I had an employer of mine write me up for stealing trash. In reality, at the end of my shift, one of my duties was to gather all of the trash. Oftentimes, I'd pick through said trash and sort out all the paper, pop cans, and water bottles in our company's recycle bin. We had a special promotion with our trash company in which our company would get money based on the number of pounds we recycled. It ended up being $1,500 per month, and we didn't pay our trash bill. So, long story short, I got a final write-up for stealing company time for sorting our recyclables. So I stopped the following month, and our manager was then angry that she had to pay a trash bill. She called the trash company, and the company told her that the past 2 years she didn't pay for trash because our company would recycle so much, and we'd get a $1,500 check and free trash service. My boss thought that the checks were a bonus for her. Anyhow, the district manager was reviewing the write-ups and saw that I got written up for stealing trash, so he called me up and asked me what was going on. I told him the story about the trash company and their promotion. He congratulated me for a job well done. The next day, he flew in to talk to my manager. He asked her what happened to the $20,000 she got from the trash company. Apparently, she tried to pin it back on me, and our district manager promptly fired her. After escorting her out, he called me into the office. He told me what happened in that meeting and offered me a promotion to assistant manager. I was called a racist because I didn't really talk to or interact with any of my fellow employees beyond what was needed. I had to explain to my boss, who was also black, that I wasn't racist, I just didn't talk to this one girl because she was incredibly annoying. So I got accused of stealing a salad. I worked as a cashier at a grocery store while in high school. Because they'd scheduled me 6.5 hours, I only qualified for a 15-minute break, not a 30-minute one. So I spent the first 8 or so minutes of my break on the phone with a mechanic working out issues with my car. I then ran back to the little cafe near the back of the store that has a salad bar and made a quick salad, which you weigh and price there. By this time, I had about 5 minutes left on my break, and the manager was very strict about not going over your 15 minutes. So I stood at the cafe register for a good minute and no one was to be found. I quickly ate my salad, then took the sticker up to the front registers to pay for the $1.99 salad. I go back on the clock and about 20 minutes later I was called into the office. They say a situation has occurred, but don't tell me what. They said they're sending me home for the day. So I came back in the next day for my shift and they called me into the office again. Waiting for me in the office is the store manager, the assistant manager, the office manager, the cafe manager, and my shift supervisor. Mind you, I'm a 16-year-old kid at their first job who had never been in any sort of trouble before. They accuse me of stealing the salad because, despite purchasing the salad, as our records do indicate, you consumed the salad before the purchase. I explained to them how the cashier at the cafe was nowhere to be found, and how if I wanted to eat during my break at that point, I would have had to eat it back in the cafe and then pay for it up front. They tell me to go home and that they'll be contacting me tomorrow regarding if I keep my job or not. I left in tears, but then got really angry at the severe overreaction, so I came back in an hour later and told them that I quit. I worked in a souvenir shop at an amusement park. It was the 4th of July, one of the busiest days because of the park's fireworks show, and we were also understaffed. The shop was just inside the gate, so we would get swamped just before closing as people bought the stuff they didn't want to walk around with all day. I was left alone in the shop just before closing time, running the cash register as people flowed in. It was utter chaos. While closing out the register that night, I noticed that a large stuffed animal had been stolen. The manager couldn't fathom that one person manning a swamped store couldn't prevent theft because not all of the displays are within sight of the register. I think it must have been a team effort, with 1 or 2 people getting my attention in one area while the other one walked off with the toy. But I didn't say that because I didn't really know how or when it happened. The butthole accused me of being in on it and looking the other way while a friend stole it so we could profit later. I didn't even know what to say. I was 17, it was my first job, and I cried for days under the assumption that every job I'd ever hold down would be like that one. Don't those things just have a gigantic markup but cost the shop almost nothing to buy in? I don't know for sure, but I think most amusement park giant toys are cheap as all heck, although that might just be the ones you win in the rigged games. I used to work at a retail store and I had a beard. One day my boss told me to get rid of my beard, so I came back the next day with a mustache. I was then told I had an attitude problem. I had a regional manager do that to me once. He was in our store almost every day and saw me growing the beard and never said a word. Then once, when I was in trouble for not driving 40 miles during a tornado alert to see a training video, he ordered me to shave off my beard as, "I have a no beards policy." When I pointed out other store managers had beards, his response was, "They had beards when I hired them." My boss thought I was goofing off in the restroom. For a few months there, he wouldn't let me flush the toilet until he came in and made sure I actually used it. I would certainly call that a hostile work environment. I'm a frickin' grown man and there's no way I'm going to let anyone inspect my duties like I'm some kind of toddler. Are you a grown man because you just used the word duty? I digress. Back when I was in high school, I worked for my town's parks department. One time, my boss, who was a total sleazeball creep to every girl there, and hated me for not being female mostly, he calls me into his office. While there, he accused me of stealing a $3 check and then says that I have to be let go. I tell him point blank that if I was to steal from the department, it would be something a lot more than a measly $3 check. What the heck would I do with that anyway? Later on, I find out from a friend of mine that he found the check underneath his desk, and then a month later someone finally reported him for his behavior with the women, and he got fired too. Karma is a witch, yo. Last night, my manager called me stupid and uneducated for not cheating a customer out of $15 due to a computer error. She thought it was obvious that I should lie about the error and garner another whopping $15 for the struggling hospitality industry. Today I'm going in for a meeting to get scolded for not lying, and I'm pretty sure I'm going to burst into tears. Screw that. Hold strong knowing that you did the right thing. You saved a person $15 that they shouldn't have had to spend. That's 2 hours of minimum wage where I live. You made the company look great, and I wouldn't doubt that you just secured a lifelong customer. You did the right thing. Don't let F-ups bring you down. You have the right to have a witness present for that conversation. Be sure to ask your manager to reiterate their exact words from the night before and write down everything that's said. Assure your boss that your human resources department will be informed of every detail. See how far your boss takes the conversation afterwards. Don't allow someone to treat you with disrespect because they have a position of authority over you. They have bosses too. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My first job with the state was awful. My supervisor was an idiot in every sense of the word. I remember once I was called into a meeting with our bureau chief. He asked us some questions about office matters, and my supervisor flat out made up lies about me that were completely against my character. I couldn't hold my frustration in and I blew up at her. I told my bureau chief that I wasn't there to play childish games, and then walked out of the meeting. I did end up winning that one and got a promotion that paid twice as much as that terrible supervisor. It was one of those awesome revenge moments where nobody got hurt. In one of my darker life periods, I was doing part-time tech support for a dinky computer shop here in town. The owner was a pill-popping nutjob that kept a loaded gat in a drawer in the front desk and regularly cheated his customers. Anyway, I'm working one day, and one of the other techs who'd been there forever and a half tells me to go install a modem in some guy's computer. I'm shaking my head because this is 2009, and I can't believe anyone would be requesting a modem. I ask him if he's sure before I go out there. He said he was. So I went out, and sure enough, he doesn't need a modem at all. He needs a wireless card or adapter. I call, go back to the store, get the card, head back to the customers, install it, head back, and yell at the guy for being an idiot, as common sense would tell anyone reasonably competent that he didn't need a modem. Long story short, next week the boss came in and fired me because the other guy made up some absolute crap about me drilling a hole in a motherboard to fix a PC, which made no sense whatsoever. On my way out, I rolled my eyes and said, fine, whatever, grabbed my stuff and left. The owner freaks out and follows me into the parking lot, yelling and screaming and ranting and raving and trying to pick a physical fight. I just calmly walked to my car, went home and had a beer. I found out later that shortly thereafter the other guy was busted for fraud and the owner went bankrupt, shortly before taking way too many substances for one person and self-deleting. When I worked at Circuit City, I had an 80GB iPod that my dad had given me because he no longer needed it. It was practically brand new. Even when I first plugged it into my computer, it came up as Richard's iPod. Well, one day it was in my purse that I kept under my counter while I was working. It went missing. I couldn't understand how it had gotten stolen. It had been one of the slowest days ever. Nonetheless, I was pretty frickin' bummed out about it. This happened during a time where the case we kept iPods in was broken, and it was horribly easy to steal them, and many had gone missing. Fast forward to a few weeks later, my coworker told me that my recently left for another job department manager thought I was the one stealing iPods, and that he got into my purse when I wasn't looking, and took it to check the serial number, but never gave it back because I was flipping out and causing a bit of a scene walking around asking everyone if they'd seen anyone take it. I was frickin' livid, I can tell you. Folks, if you're so afraid of admitting that you're wrong that you're going to straight up just commit theft, then you really need to take a good look at yourself and head to a therapist's office. That is, after you give back the 80GB iPod that in the late 2000s was worth an ungodly amount of money, right? Several years ago, I was working for a sporting goods store as the customer service desk guy. Mostly what I did was returns and some special stuff with Ticketmaster and hunting and fishing licenses. While it wasn't a glamorous job, I did like it because I'm an outdoorsy guy, so the clientele were fun to talk to. One day we were informed we were getting a new general manager as the old one, who was decent but distant, was being transferred. The new manager was a raving, harpy, butthole C-word. She enjoyed making employees upset, didn't give a flying frick about our customers, did nothing to improve anything about the store, and kept the other managers in her office with endless meetings about, quote, improving the store. After a few months of this bullcrap and seeing some of the high school girls hired to work in shoes crying after her ranting at them, I had enough. I wrote a rather eloquent letter to corporate about her behavior and actions and had several employees sign it. 2 days later, several regional higher-ups arrived and proceeded to chew her out big time. She was suspended for 2 weeks and told that if the store didn't improve within the next quarter, she'd be fired. But that's just the beginning of the story, dear listener. I thought I'd won. But no, I had not. Apparently she found out it was me who wrote the letter. She probably got told by one of the other employees, I'm not so sure. And she was out for revenge. She got into the computer system and started to fake records showing I'd been selling gift cards to myself, pocketing the cash difference and then buying merchandise with those cards. Mostly candy and pop and small stuff, which she was probably pocketing since our counts weren't ever off. She then called in loss prevention, who weren't doing their jobs too well, because they didn't look closely at the files and their last edited dates. Yay for Windows NT Office. Because they believed her and called in the county sheriffs. 2 deputies came in, looked over the evidence. To their credit, they asked, "Are you sure, and can you explain this?" several times, and I got the feeling they were unsure about the whole mess. Nice guys too. They offered to take me out through the back instead of parading me past customers. They let me have a cigarette before we left and were generally courteous and respectful. Anyway, I ended up getting arrested on felony theft charges. Taken to jail, booked, the whole shebang. I was in tears for pretty much 3 days. But I knew this was bullcrap, so I went to my parents to help hire a lawyer for me. I told him the whole story and said under no circumstances were we pleading out to anything. He said, okay, and set up a meeting with the DA to talk about motions and such. When we arrived, the DA was all smiles and very polite. He informed me that the paperwork wasn't quite done yet, but they were dropping all charges and filing false report charges against my old manager. The investigators had looked over the evidence and found that A. the files for almost 3 months' worth of thefts had been edited on 2 days, neither of which I'd been present for, but that she had, and B. they'd all been edited from her computer, a computer I didn't have access to, and C. several of the thefts occurred on days when I was in the system as being out of state on vacation. I felt a lot happier after that and felt even better when my ex-boss was found to have fled the state and checked herself into a mental hospital for a nervous breakdown. She was eventually brought back, charged, and convicted. Last I saw, she was an assistant manager at a gas station, while I'm now a federal firefighter and in school to become a police officer, and I'll make damn sure I read out every bit of evidence put in front of me. It's only after I saw her pumping gas that I could claim victory over her. I worked in retail as a cashier at a pet store for a long time, and occasionally when there was nothing going on, I'd just grab a couple of tennis balls and juggle them to keep myself amused. I'm pretty good at it. I can do 3 in all sorts of ways without looking at it or thinking about it, so I converse with customers perfectly normally when needed to, and most of them find it funny. If I suspected otherwise, I'd stop before they even made it close to conversation range, and I'd done it long enough that I was a pretty good judge of that kind of thing. Cue a day such as that, I was bored and juggling while I watched the front door. A family comes in with little kids, they laugh at the juggling man, and come to talk to me for a little while about reptiles. And juggling, of course. While I tried to teach one of their sons, who was 5 or 6 years old, how to juggle because he asked me to. Good times were had by all. They walk off and do their shopping with their little son trying to juggle the mini tennis balls that I gave him. Immediately, I got called into the back by the assistant manager, with another manager present as a witness, I guess, who decides he's going to rip me a new one for being disrespectful to the customers by juggling and not giving them my full attention. I respectfully, and perhaps sarcastically, no promises, disagree, and when he looks to the other manager in the room to back him up, you could just tell the guy was completely uninterested in getting involved, and he basically had nothing bad to say. The assistant manager continues to lay into me a bit more, says he's going to work with me on not being disrespectful like that, and if it continued would have to talk about my employment. I leave. Months later, the new store manager gets hired, walks to the front with the assistant manager, and sees me juggling. The assistant manager gets the look that he's about to rip me a new one, but the store manager laughs, compliments me on my juggling, goes grabs his own tennis balls and starts juggling as well. Oh boy, the look on the assistant manager's face was priceless. A year after I started working for a company as a graphic designer, it turned out I was also the marketing and web design departments as well, my wife got pregnant with our first child. This was an office mostly filled with middle-aged women. I was in my mid to late 20s and they were all excited and even threw us a baby shower. All went well and my son was born and I took 2 weeks vacation time to be with my wife and child. 2 weeks that I'd saved up, by the way, not even parental leave. I came back and my boss was suddenly very aloof and non-communicative with me, where previously she and I were pretty close. This went on for several months until I learned that budget cuts have eliminated my position. Effective in 6 months' time, I found out. Through my coworkers, I found out that my boss was angry I had had a baby and wasn't dedicated to the cause. She was also at the budget meeting, and initially there were no cuts to our division, but she threw me under the bus, saying my work was non-essential. So here I am with a young family and staring down the barrel of unemployment. Turns out, though, that another company had been following my work and were eager to sign me on. Needless to say, I didn't do crap for the next 6 months, and I'm now happy at my current position and making more moolah to boot. The company is now in the crapper, and I poached one of their biggest clients on the way out. In short, I wasn't part of my ex-boss's fascist view of the future since I started a family. When was the cringe so strong that you barely survived? My sister went to an 18th birthday with 3 friends where over 120 people had RSVP'd and only the host, his parents, and his girlfriend were there. She was telling me about it today and I couldn't think about anything except how horrible high school people can be. So here's the story. This guy set up a Facebook event for this party at this big hall, and out of the 700 plus people invited, 120 people RSVP'd. So it's not like nobody knew about it. Considering the amount of people that knew about it and come, even if they hadn't clicked attending, was the fact that this guy booked a massive hall that could cater for such a large event. This cost him around $1,500, which included food and security and stuff. Then he decided instead of using an iPod, which would probably get lost or stolen, he'd hire a DJ. That cost $400. For all of this, the host had spent months working overtime, so he was actually able to afford it and hold, quote, the best party ever. Come the night of the party, weeks of preparation, money and organization, this party is expected to go off. My sister headed off to this massive venue, fashionably late as well, and nobody else was there. Much to their surprise, it's just an empty hall with lights going on and a DJ doing his thing. Then she finds the host and asks the normal questions, where is everyone and stuff like that. He's as baffled as my sister was. Not even his best mates had shown up, which was the most surprising part. Now, this is just the most gut-wrenching part of the whole thing. He then calls his friends. He asks them, where the hell are you guys? And obviously, on loudspeaker, an uproar of laughter comes from the person speaking, and you can also hear it in the background. He starts crying and everything, absolutely devastated about what has happened. He's out of pocket $1,900 at least, and knowing that all his friends possibly organized a boycott for his event. When I told this story, I couldn't stomach how harsh and horrible people can be. I'd never have thought this could have happened, especially on such a large scale as this. For my high school's 5-year anniversary, one enterprising student made a Facebook group and went through the yearbook, adding everybody that he could possibly find. About 630 of the roughly 700 students from our graduating class joined the group and started in on how everyone was doing, where everyone was living and stuff. When he sent out invites to get together, about 150 people said yes and 300 or so said maybe. The guy who organized it rented out a private room at a bowling alley, paid for a bartender, and got a ridiculous amount of food and such, as well as having all 4 yearbooks and putting together a DVD of random videos from sporting events, plays, funny skits from the school news, everything. This guy went all out. On the day of the reunion, 5 people came. The guy who organized it and his girlfriend, who wasn't even in our class, myself and a friend, and one random person who I recognized but never spoke to, and another guy who actually worked at the bowling alley. Quite possibly the saddest thing I've ever seen. The look of defeat on the guy's face was crushing. I've never felt such vicarious humiliation in my life. We ended up just getting drunk and bowling a few games before the black cloud of shame left everyone silent, and my friend and I left abruptly. And to Alan, if you read this, everyone in our class was a butthole anyway. Sorry, bro. Oh boy. Is this going to be an entire video of people being humiliated and financially broken because people ditch their parties? Because I'm not sure I can survive that. Oh, thank God, the next one is only about grievous bodily harm. I decided that I'd go to my junior prom, even though I had no date and all of about 3 friends at the time, none of whom were going. I mowed lawns to rent a tux, and since my dad was working, I started walking towards my school the night of the prom. As I'm walking down the sidewalk, a group of guys drives past me in a convertible going the opposite direction, and they ask me if I'm going to the prom. I recognize a couple of them as the popular kids, so I say yes. They said they'd swing around and give me a ride. They made a U-turn, and I see one begin to stand up in the back seat of the car. The top was down. It was beginning to get dark, and I couldn't see too well, but I thought I saw him make some kind of motion like he was saying, "Come on!" And then I came to consciousness in an ambulance. After I get as much of my bearings as I was going to, I freaked right the frick out. There was blood on my tuxedo and EMTs standing next to me. I asked them in a confused teenager sort of way what the actual F happened and where was I. They told me someone had reported seeing me lying on the sidewalk, unconscious and bleeding. I was dumbstruck. I said I don't remember anything other than waiting to get a ride from someone. There was apparently a can full of beer sitting very close by which they believed I'd been hit in the head with. Then it all came together for me in one very terrible instant. I was struck paralyzed with fear as my brain pieced together what must have happened. When I saw that guy stand up in the back seat making a hand motion, he must have been throwing something at me. In the darkness, I didn't see it coming and was most likely completely unprepared when it hit me. I must not have even known what hit me. They said I was curled in the fetal position when they found me, which I don't remember going into. I remember nothing from the time, just the car coming towards me and then waking up in the ambulance. The police took the can as evidence, and apparently it had blood of mine on it and was dented from having hit my head. Of course, every person in that car covered for one another, and as such there weren't arrests or disciplines of any kind. I knew it was them, though. That's the only thing that made sense to me more than 10 years later. I never went to another prom. 9th birthday, I invited my entire grade. My mum, my little sister and I had spent a week making a piñata by hand. We were living in extreme poverty. I got thrift store toys for presents. No complaints from me, though. I loved the thrift store and they were still toys. We didn't have a lot to eat sometimes. I was later put in foster care, but that's another story. But my mum had saved up to have snacks and such, and I remember that she put so much work into making it a great party. I knew my best friend had some kind of family event that weekend, so she couldn't come, so we had plans to have a sleepover the next weekend. We sat in the yard waiting for 2 hours, and nobody came. My little sister and I ended up just taking turns hitting the piñata ourselves. I wanted to cry, but my mum already looked so sad and I felt too guilty to let the tears come. Worst birthday ever. Just last night, I was forced to go watch a friend of a friend's band play some crappy gig at a hole-in-the-wall bar. They went on late after another band had already played, and the audience just kept dwindling in size. It was pretty excruciating. It took all of my willpower not to look like I was in agony. Afterwards, we all had to pretend that they'd rocked out and that we were impressed. I mean, he looked so happy. We couldn't ruin it for him. I used to work in the showroom at Chuck E. Cheese when I was in high school. My primary job was to throw birthday parties, and throw birthday parties I frickin' did. I made damn sure that every kid there had the greatest birthday party of all time. I worked the 4th of July one year, and we had just one party that day. I got to work on it. The RSVP number was fairly small, like 5 people or so, but it got worse than that. It was just the father and son. The mum and mum's family were proud residents of the state penitentiary in Oklahoma or something. Dad got custody and moved with the son to Tennessee and had his party there. He invited a few friends, but none of them came, so it was just the father and son at the birthday table. They weren't very well off and they bought the bare-bones party option. I asked around to all of my co-workers and threw in about $40 of my own money to make sure that they had the best birthday bash ever. It was an hour from close and nobody was there, so all of the employees just started partying with them. We made them 10 pizzas, and the kid got to pick whatever toppings he wanted. We then gave him about 500 tokens. We played and partied for 2 hours and then put on the show after closing. After the show, my boss brought out an Xbox and the kid got to play Xbox on the giant TVs in the showroom. It was close to midnight when they left. My boss brought fireworks and beer and all of us employees were going to raise heck in the parking lot. But we decided to invite the kid too. He got to shoot off bottle rockets and Roman candles and whatnot, and his dad got a beer out of it. Later, Dad brings the employees aside and starts crying about how awesome of a party it was. I worked at Chuck E. Cheese's for 2 years and hated most of it, but that night was one of the best of my entire life. I think the total pot on them was close to $200. My boss matched my donation and everybody else pitched in a few bucks here and there. I haven't seen the kid or the father since, but I do know that the father wrote an email to customer service and we got fancy pins in our lanyards. There was this hospitality hero competition, and if the managers ever caught you doing something nice for the customers, you got a slice of pizza on the chart. 4 slices of pizza and like 15 pizzas got you to the hospitality hero level, where you had this awesome pin with Chuck on it. I think all of us working that night got one. Yay. You know, this might actually be the most wholesome story to come out of the slave pits of Charles' entertainment cheese. There was 100% less pee, duty, and throw-up than most of those stories have, and it didn't even involve physical violence. Well done, everybody. You and your co-workers seem like good eggs. For my 20th birthday party, I was going to have a big barbecue. I bought the meat, the cake, the corn, everything. I invited 50 people, and not one of them showed up. Not one person. This sort of thing also happened to an acquaintance of mine. The kid was really nerdy, but didn't really have any self-awareness, so he didn't really have friends. He organized a big going-away party our senior year. A friend and I knew what was going to happen, so out of pity we decided to go. Big surprise, no one else was there. Just a big empty house with a few bowls of chips all set up and the guy sobbing in the corner. We stood there awkwardly for a few minutes. It was miserable. So we ran back home, grabbed our laptops, ran back and had an impromptu mini LAN party. We actually had a blast and the host ended up having a great time. The party ended up lasting about 24 hours. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I graduated from high school 3 years ago, I wasn't invited to a single party afterwards. Now, the optimist in you might think, oh, people must not have had any parties. Everyone gets invited to graduation events. Well, my dear internet friends, the sad truth is that there was one. It was held at a local country club. There were over 200 people in attendance for a graduation event of my class of 192. And how do I know this, you might ask? I was present when everyone else was invited. I was watching the computer when the Facebook event creator, who was our class president, sent out the Facebook invites and I watched her uncheck my name and 1 or 2 other kids' names before sending it. I was also present when the paper invites were given out. The school gave permission to hand them out in our homeroom. I was the only one that wasn't given one in my homeroom. My school doesn't have official graduation events outside of the usual honors day, commencement and such. Yep, people suck. I went to a surprise party where I was the only non-family member there, and I didn't even know the girl that well. Turns out, her friends were buttholes, but she's an awesome person and it made her feel better than no one being there otherwise, so I don't really regret it. On my 21st birthday, I brought a few of my best friends to Six Flags, bought their tickets because they were having a hard time finding work, and spent the day having fun with them. We planned to leave early and go back to my place to celebrate turning 21 with some drinking. But as I was driving them back, they got a call and were all invited to a party except for me. So they all had me drop them off, except for one guy who just went home and left me to be alone as they went to a party. So I spent the night drinking alone as a rag. I now can't stand the thought of celebrating my own birthday. I should make it clear that these were friends I knew for over 10 years, and this was the only time they ever really behaved like really bad friends. I'm still in rough waters with them, but I went with the everyone gets one mentality. If they ever pull crap like that again, they're gone. And I don't do them many favors these days, and none of them involving money. My cousin's wedding was sad. Rented hall, catered, DJ. Maybe 15 people showed up. Invited over 150, mostly family. You know, the same sad party story that's going around a lot happened to me in elementary school as well. My parents moved us around a lot, so I wasn't able to keep friends for a long time. I moved to a new school and decided that the best way to make friends would be to invite a whole bunch of girls to my birthday party. My mum put this whole thing together and only 2 of them showed up. I was devastated. I asked one of the girls from school why they didn't come and she said, "My mum told me it looked like a child made the invitation, so I couldn't go." Which, I am a child. Needless to say, I wasn't very socially graceful after that. Wow, this might be the most depressing bunch of stories I've ever read at 3 in the morning. Yep, my social anxiety is coming back just from reading these answers. My mother frequented a 50-plus age group chat room on WBS, which was once known as the IRSociety.com. This was during the mid-90s. The regulars eventually started organizing meetups, for which they'd later expound upon the great time that was had and wonderful people who met in person. One such regular was a quadriplegic gentleman whose personal aide would type for him. He'd been to a few local meetups, and everyone really seemed to admire his personality and spirit. He was on a fixed income and saved for nearly a year to fly, without his aide, to a meetup on the US East Coast. Only when he was wheeled out to the terminal, nobody was waiting for him, and nobody ever came. He spent 10 hours sitting alone, helpless, and hoping the alleged woman who invited him and promised to host him at her house was just very late before finally getting help from a passerby. Somebody even had the heart to help the guy try calling the listed names in the phone book, but to no avail. He showed up online again a week later, disheartened and angry that he'd let some cold-hearted troll get the better of him under multiple screen names and personalities. Even at the age of 14, when I didn't give two craps about chatroom drama, my faith in humanity died a little bit hearing that story. I threw a toga party, and while 300 people said they were going to come, only 20 of them actually did, and one of them crapped himself halfway through the party. Let's spin this tale around. 3rd grade. Teacher takes the whole class aside and asks, "All of you were invited to Charles' birthday party and none of you went. What happened?" At which point it became clear that I was the only kid that Charles hadn't invited. The joke was on him because I would have been at that party. Poor kid was at Chuck E. Cheese all by himself. Wait, so not only was Chucky chucking a party at Chuck E. Cheese, he never chucked an invite your way. What a chuck! Although one has to feel bad for him. Hopefully all the ones who never turned up got food poisoning and chucked their guts up. In Spanish culture, it's tradition to have a quinceañera. I didn't want to have one, but my mum insisted on having it either way. So she decided to have it in the house, right? It's not very big in my house, and she'd already invited the family and close friends from out of state, out of the country even. So my mum limited me to inviting 5 friends, but she got to invite all the people she wanted. So we were expecting more than 40 people to show up. Maybe 6 came. 2 of my friends and 4 family members which lived in the city. The presents were a card with $5 and some cheap perfume. But I don't resent that last one because it was with very good intentions from a very sweet, poor old lady. I was in a super poofy dress for hours and heels that were killing me, while pretty much everyone else was in more or less semi-casual attire. On top of it all, it was raining, and it was on my actual day of birth. What bites the most was the following year when we did it for my sister. She invited the same people, but she decided to have it in a rented space, which I'd suggested to my mum when she had mine, but she said it just wouldn't work out. She spent almost 6 times the money on my sister's and even got a DJ and a lavish cake. Almost everyone except for a few came, and there were about 105 people invited. The same people who didn't turn up for mine turned up for my sister. Everyone was all fancy and it was organized, not a complete mess. The presents were good makeup, good perfume, and about $600 cash in cards, and some shoes and clothes. Needless to say, after that event I felt like crap and felt like there is definitely a favorite in the family. On my 12th birthday, I told my parents that I'd pay for my whole party, and I did. And it was awesome. Well, it would have been if anyone else but my best friend and brother showed up. So there I was with my best friend and brother at a private laser tag room, stuffing our faces with party food and stuff like that, when my mum called one of my other friends' mums, and the kid picked up and just started laughing. I cried in the toilets, but my best friend cheered me up. I got a job and used all of my spare time to pay for that. It was a $700 party. All of that money was down the drain, and I even did my homework in school at lunch. After that, my parents took me to the pound and I took home a puppy, so I guess he made everything much better. And Tommy, I know you live online, you troll, and if you're hearing this, I hate you for telling everyone else not to come. And to Lachlan and Ash, thanks for being the only true friend, Ash, and Lachlan, thanks for being an awesome brother. I went to a costume party. It was not a costume party. I've resolved that if this ever happens to me, I'm just going to simply act normal, and when people ask me why I'm wearing a costume, stare at them quizzically and ask, "Costume?" When I was in primary school, about 6 or 7 years old, this guy invited all 30 of the people in our class to his birthday. I didn't know him very well, so asked everyone else if they were going, and they said that they were. So the day of the party, nobody else was there except him, his cousin, and his parents. No one else showed up at all. But it was their loss because there was a crap ton of pizza and an endless supply of junk food for us. The guy who threw the party became my best friend and still is 16 years later. I have a heart warmer for all of you to make up for all these tragic stories, although it starts with a snub. I have a friend, let's call him Jed, who went to a high school leavers party. This guy was given a bad roll of the dice when it came to certain genes. He was unusually short, getting plump, had glasses, wasn't great in the looks department, and had a bit of a geeky aspect going on. But all in all, he was a very likable guy if you weren't shallow as F, and I've had many good times with him, even though side by side we look like the main characters in the film Twins. Jed, if you're listening to this, by the way, hi, you can probably tell who I am. Anyway, Jed was invited to this leavers party, hosted by this chick who was hot. A star pupil, basically the real-life equivalent of the movie Prom Queen, only stereotypically shallow and witchy. We'll call her Kez. Not normally socially popular at that point, Jed was getting on fine with the other guests, even though he wasn't great friends with many of them, and the guy he was getting on particularly well with was the brother of the hostess. Anyway, long story short, at one point as Jed was going to get a drink or more snacks or something, Kez turned around, spotted him, and in a move straight out of some cheap cheerleader movie, made a disgusted face and said, "Oh, who invited him?" Loud enough for Jed and several others to hear. The feeling of embarrassment must have been sickening for him. I wasn't there, or I'd have told her where to shove those words and left with him, but he had nobody backing him up at the time. It kind of wrote off his night. So he went back to the crowd he'd been hanging with and started to diplomatically say his farewells to the people he'd been talking to, reckoning the night wasn't going to get any better. Some of the people he was saying goodbye to were surprised he was leaving so early, and so suddenly, as they'd been having a good night together. They didn't know what had just happened. And one of the people who was curious was the brother of Kez, that witchy hostess. He saw that Jed looked a little upset and asked what was wrong, so Jed told him. The guy listened, looked over at his sister who seemed to be looking back at him uncomfortably. The guy asked if Jez could stay while he sorted something out, but Jed said he needed to leave. The guy shook Jed's hand and apologized profusely on behalf of his sister, and said that Jed would be missed. Jed went into the hall and got his coat. He put on his shoes and opened the front door. He turned back to give a final wave to the people at the party and was treated to the sight of Kez, the hostile hostess, and her brother standing in a corner. Kez's brother was clearly angry and giving Kez a real piece of his mind. Kez was bright red with embarrassment and openly crying while her friends took their turn being frozen with sympathetic shame for the second time that night. From what I know of Kez, it was long overdue. In short, nerdy friend of mine gets rudely snubbed at high school leavers party by the hostess. Hostess gets humiliated for her attitude in front of everyone by her own brother. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.